Oh, she's gonna be doing in here and you're gonna be out there?
No, we normally are both
Right.
here, but I figured she could sit over there, that way she can do other things. And
Oh, okay.
hopefully, back to a little bit of
A little
more
normal.
All right, so for code enforcement and nuisances, the memo that I prepared to kind of give an outline of the second packet is a brief proposal of verbiage that we revised. It's not based as much on old verbiage. I just kind of started from scratch, threw some ideas out there. I'm sure it's going to have a whole lot of revisions and tweaking, but we had to start somewhere. And proposing that rather than a code compliance officer, maybe it's titled more like a code compliance representative or something similar along that line. That person would receive the complaints, log them, assign them a number, and then give them to the appropriate department or departments whose expertise lie in the area of whatever that complaint is, rather than that person trying to coordinate everything and answer questions that they have no knowledge of. We'll give it to the department that knows that topic, hoping that that will eliminate some of the frustration for the people making the complaints and the ones saying, well, what do you want me to do to make it okay? We're just trying to think of avenues to simplify the process, maybe get some more people on board with bringing their property into compliance, but also let the departments who know that topic, because it's their RCW, their WAC, their codes, be the main handlers of whatever that issue is, rather than the one person from my department trying to do it all when they don't know those answers. So that's kind of how I threw it out there. Obviously, we'll be making lots of tweaks and adjustments, but that's kind of the starting point because, like I said, we have to start somewhere. So the verbiage is mainly based upon that approach. An idea of a revision for the form, rather than calling it a complaint form, maybe change it to be a request for investigation form with the different departments who would have input. A draft of like a good neighbor guide. Clark County and some other areas use those just to give people basics. It's very short compared to some of those because it's just a starting point. And I didn't want to spend vast amounts of time while we were still deciding. And then some drafts of different certificates of non-compliance that may be filed. And then if something gets rectified, we can do a declaration of compliance to clear off the non-compliance. So that's kind of the approach I've taken as our kicking off point for discussions today.
All right, who wants to lead off?
I'll start.
Sure.
I think it's good. You can tell the hard work was put in it, and I appreciate that. And for the most part, other than little tiny tweakers, whatever, I don't have a lot for you.
Okay.
And it would need to go to the P's office. I didn't take up their time now while we're deciding, but
On a draft.
yeah, I mean, once we have a little more clarified as to the direction the board wants to go, then I would give it to the P's office for review and comment and legalities and all of that good stuff.
I want to hear from the department heads that are around here by handing off a lot of that work that's going to increase their workload within their department. Either way, I think that workload was still having to be done, whether somebody gave a complaint that was outside of Frank's expertise, he'd have to go to the department. But I want to hear from the department heads on this direction.
Right. I agree, but I think having Frank do everything, we're just gonna use the Frank word even though he's not here anymore.
Right.
Having him be the person in charge of septic tanks is a mistake. Because what he's doing is he's going to public health. They're giving him the information. And then turning over here, and it's like playing the game of telephone. I think there's humongous room for error. So just wanted to throw that out there. If we continue doing it the same way we're doing.
Gordy, go ahead.
How it works is work with Lynn and before her skip, and pretty much if this involves right away, they refer it to us to get it cleaned up or taken care of. We've always done that.
And you just handle it, or do you
Yes.
work with Frank
No,
to handle it?
we either hand it off and it's ours,
Got it.
and we take care of it. Because it's our code.
Right.
And that's.
And
our
you're the
area.
professional and the expert on that code.
Yeah,
I agree.
So planning's been taking over whenever there's a complaint, if this is our code, we will communicate with the landowners or whoever to try to get this resolved or get the proper permitting. But Frank would help us to be the centralized person to coordinate. So he will always have the most updated information. Because a lot of times it's not just one department, it might involve other departments as well. So to get a full picture about that enforcement case, to have a centralized person, I think that would be really helpful. But if that's just planning related, we've been taking the lead to try to resolve those issues.
Dave, yeah, I was on the phone.
I have a quick question for Lynn. The way you have it worded, if I read it correctly, is we'll call it the Frank. If it was planning, they would go tell planning, hey, here's your baby, but also be there and available as a liaison if needed between the complainant or the landowner and planning, go with them out there if they need to, and still be actively involved. They wouldn't just be turning it over and saying, no, it's yours now, unless like Public Works sounds like he wants it that way.
well, I mean, like, it's like Moji said, sometimes people start stacking stuff on their property out to the edge and there's not enough room, so they just kind of move out into right of way. So anything in the right of way, we take care of, but there's still the stack of stuff.
Right, so you would
that's a
still,
nuisance.
So my question though is what happened, because I can think of several instances where it's not a single department's jurisdiction, where it's a right of way issue, it's a planning issue, there's some building code stuff, their septic tank's bad. In that scenario, which is actually going to be most scenarios where it's not going to be a
Exactly.
single, like I get the idea. I'm not opposed because I think we're already doing that. If it's
To a degree.
if it's to a degree, if it's a strictly right of way road department thing, they just take care of it. If it's a strictly planning issue, they just take care of it. They do it. But what do we do if it's a multi-jurisdiction thing? Then who's in
Everybody
charge of it?
Well, kind of it would be Frank, but then we're bouncing to the other departments. But some of the frustration that people get is it's like, well, if I have a complaint about this, why do I have to go through you? So I mean, there's some of those things where if we can maybe tweak,
right,
those
and this has it
nuances.
worded that it's gonna be the liaison.
right,
working
the
with
liaison will
departments,
take it and then
coordinate
give
with
it.
the departments, and if needed, a deputy.
But what we've ran into and on some things in the past is, well, I can't help you, you need to talk to them. Well, you can help though, because it's your topic. Why can't you answer a question about,
And I guess my
whatever.
worry is I don't want Frank answering a question that's not in his, he's not legally trained. I gotta quit using Frank. We'll just call
Yeah,
it code compliance.
The new Frank.
The code compliance.
May think he knows something, but it's not actually correct under law. We use a 30, 60-day rule thing.
Prime example.
It doesn't necessarily make it legal, even though that's what you keep saying. You need to go to that department and they need to be the ones that are the main facilitators. You're now helping them. That's my thinking.
It just feels a lot of times though, it would get kicked back to us, even though we had handed it off. It would be like, well, you need to go through them. You need to talk to them. And it's like, okay, they did, and I've done my part, but I can't answer these questions. So,
So what you're
and
saying,
nobody else gets the calls that we get, if they.
But isn't the liaison still gonna get the calls?
But it'd be nice to share that
Right.
burden of if someone's frustrated because something's not getting done, and maybe it's because the septic is still stinking, then can you yell at them too, not just me?
Right.
I
think
mean.
the way it is now, the code compliance officer is the number one guy. In any department he's working with to help him is the number two guy. This is gonna shift that. If it's.
Or at least maybe have
septic,
it like
it's now
this.
giving it to health department. You're the number one guy and the compliance officer is number two to help you, but this is your baby now because it's septic. Don't pass the buck. You're the professional. We'll work with you to get it handled, but I think you got to take that number one job away from.
Okay. I think is Mr. Kavanaugh, David, are you on the
Yes,
phone?
please.
Do you have a comment, or we're hearing from the other directors? So,
Yeah, I'm here. I would definitely have to agree with what Mochi said about oftentimes it's not just one issue on the property. And having that liaison is, I think, key when you're dealing with multiple codes and multiple code compliance issues. I think I need maybe someone to confirm, but isn't that position paid for out of the general fund right now?
yes.
It's general fund,
So,
my budget.
Yeah, it's out of.
right. But if it were to move to other departments, you're looking at now spending a lot more money on each department doing their own code compliance than just one centralized location.
The person would still be a liaison, but rather than being a liaison and taking care of 3 departments now, it would be a liaison and they tell me, I'll take care of my part. They'll tell health, they'll take care of their part. Planning will take care of their part. I
The
mean,
liaison will be giving legal advice over septic tanks anymore.
and that's kind of what it's a lot of times been. And instead of being a true liaison, it's been they'll do it all type thing.
The buck's been passed.
It always gets kicked back
Well,
to us.
I mean, health has always worked with Frank in figuring out the issue and figuring out solutions, but the compliance part has always been through Frank. I mean, we've always been assisting with the technical expertise the whole time about which code to apply, which rule applies to them, or which law applies to the complaint. But I think, if it were to divide out to other departments, they're going to be looking to pay for that time that is spent for each one of their specialists or each one of their individuals to, be accommodated for the time they spend in those. Because, we don't charge anyone right now for our code compliance or fine anyone for our health code compliance. So it would be a pretty big change for us.
Okay, yes, sir.
So as I look at it, we have to have the expertise in the individual departments that have to manage that. If this is going to be a full-time position for code liaison compliance, I see that all applications come into that person, they create the application, they're going to run the paperwork on it. When they go to, say it's a septic issue, they're going to work as kind of a middleman, but like David would be included. But if they can't come to an understanding, a voluntary understanding like we have out here north of town, then it starts through that abatement process. That abatement process, David doesn't need to be involved in that. That's the code compliance liaison that works through that process, whether it's the fines or the going through the nuisance abatement group that's going to manage all that. I see that person as having to do all of that. You don't want David being out there trying to assess fines and all that because he's doing other things.
I don't look at this as being written up that way. I look at it And this is nothing on public health or sewers. We've just somehow picked that topic to use. So don't
Good
think
example.
we're complaining about your department or you're handling about nuisance. Anyway, no, the way I understood it was that the compliance officer would pass that to health to try to get compliance, since they're the professionals. And if they couldn't get it, it gets kicked back into Frank's lap for abatement.
Because
It gets
then
passed off for
they're-
the professional expertise and then gets passed back.
That's more of what I'm thinking, yes, because
Isn't that just an extra step though? I mean, we've worked with Frank in the past, or that code compliance officer in the past for
yeah,
technical expertise.
it's just kind of cleaning up the area though of contact us, you have an alleged sewer violation, contact us. Well, then they contact us and then we go to health. Take that little step out of it and we can say, you have an alleged violation, you need to contact health to see how do you fix a failed septic, because I don't know how you do that.
I know of some that have, that's why I said I'm trying to eliminate the game of telephone we all played in preschool, where one department's telling Frank and then Frank goes out and tells the person, but he's not really telling the correct information. It really should have stuck with the original person so that things didn't get lost in translation.
And my person can send the letters, but I would like the departments to say, our letter needs to be worded like this, so that we're not sending out a dummy code enforcement letter that's maybe not specific enough to that topic of failed septic or shoreline management or what have you.
And that's why how I read it is you're passing it to that department. If they can't get compliance or need your help, it comes back, but you're just handing off the baton.
So otherwise they're
To the
calling me and I'm
professional.
saying, hang on, let me put you through to David. Well, they would just know, I need to talk to David, or I need to talk to Nikki, or I need to talk to Lori, or
Or if it's a
whoever.
road, I don't want Gordy telling Frank it needs to be, 3/4 minus bedrock and Frank trying to take notes and then go out and give the wrong
It's just kind of
information.
cleaning up some of those little glitches we've had, because it's been, as soon as somebody hears that we have a code question, it's just automatically, you need to talk to them. Well, then I get on the phone, I'm like, no, you really need to talk to this person,
But
because
is
that's the
that,
question you have.
I'm doing this from 50,000 feet, but I don't know, that might be the perception, but I suspect there's all kinds of issues that are being settled that are not in the departments before they even come to you, or there isn't. Probably 95% of stuff all gets resolved before there is no code case. There is nothing that I don't know. I would look to the departments and as far as I'm thinking of we refer things as far as on roads and right of ways and stuff all the time, and they just handle it, I literally refer the complainant to the department. They call them, or they call them back, or probably planning and stuff like too. I think the issue I'm having is that by the time it gets to somebody's filing a complaint, this is a person that there's a problem. This isn't a piece of missing information, or they don't have it. They don't want to handle it. They don't want to do it, and they have to be forced into doing it generally. That's different somehow. And I don't know, you had your hand up, Richie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I could be wrong, but I dealt with co-compliance related to planning issues before. And I wouldn't say that we always use the code enforcement officer as the middle person. Because if the person who's in, have violations and they need to get through a permitting process, planning will take over and will communicate with them if they're willing to go through the process, even though it might be difficult. But a lot of times, if someone doesn't want to comply, it doesn't matter if we are able and willing to provide technical assistance to help them through, and we have no way to make them go through that process.
Neither do I.
Right.
That's, I think, the bigger issue.
And right now, we do have like a co-enforcement ordinance in place. And so a lot of time when people call and complain about anything related to planning, we have to follow that adopted ordinance. Is we have to ask them to first file a complaint form to start the process. So you will ultimately get to planning, and then we can, follow up with that, follow through with it. But we cannot just take people's complaint because that's not how everything is set up right now. So that might be need to amend the code. But until that's changed, we have to follow what's in place right now. Is my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's just how we've been handling those code cases.
Commissioner Anderson.
So when this first really came up and I started thinking about it, this is why I wanted to use the term liaison, because by the time it gets to the point where somebody's fully complaining or there's multiple people complaining, you have somebody out there that's dug their heels likely in the sand and they don't want to change. And I see the liaison, somebody has to be the bad cop and somebody has to be the good cop. And I look at the liaison as the person that creates the connection with the individual to try to create a rapport, to try to get them to get to that point by playing the good cop. It is David in public health that's saying, look, man, you can't just put the sewage on the ground. Here is the law that says you can't do it. This is a public health crisis if this continues. And the liaison's working with the person trying to help them. Like, this is what they're saying. I'm here to try to help you come into compliance and think outside the box and find ways that we can get you to be there. And so that's why I wanted to use the term like a liaison, so that that person is trying to push them to go do good. And the actual department that has the laws is saying, look, this is the situation. This is where you have to get.
And maybe that's not as much the piece that's broken
Right.
as the ending. That's where we're broken is, okay, yeah, we know what the laws say. We know there's the problem, but we haven't had the oomph to actually make them change it or get all the 40 cars out of there or clean up all the junk. I think that's the bigger part that's broken than the first part. My person can be the representative and do all of that. That part hasn't been as much of the issue as the ending of now what?
I have a quickie question. If you're gonna send a letter to a resident that we're on septic, so let's just say it's septic, that your septic is blown up, you need to fix it. What's on the letterhead?
Code enforcement.
Code enforcement. Do you think it would carry more weight to the resident if it said public health department versus code enforcement? I mean, just an idea.
Or
Maybe it
do
does,
both.
maybe it doesn't.
Or maybe we need to do both.
And that's kind of what my thinking was, is I think it would carry more weight than just code enforcement guy. That's kind of why I wanted to give code enforcement guy a badge somewhere, give him a bigger stick or the threat of a stick. That's only a thought, but I just think letterhead could mean something, but.
And we could
Even if
do
you want to do it
both.
your way, but Frank types it out on public work or.
I don't have a way. I'm just,
Yeah.
I think I'm still trying to really understand what,
So we
I mean,
will-
it sounds like as I see it, the breakdown has been the actual, you said it, getting to the final, which is the person with the big stick. That's the part that we that's the
yeah,
problem.
That's
It's
the
not-
problem.
It isn't, I don't
think-
believe there really has been that much of a disconnect
Yeah.
between the compliance officer and the departments providing technical
I think-
expertise. It's nobody wants to be the one to actually go beat on the person and make them do what they're supposed to do. And it's like, oh, it's the septic. We want you, health department, you be the bad guy with the stick. And the health department says, we don't have any sticks. That's your job.
But we don't have any sticks.
But you don't have any sticks either. And so it's like, how do we get to this? That's the problem. And the stick we have always, the real stick is either fines after you've exhausted a pretty extensive legal process to, because it's a big deal to find somebody. Or the other is that we just go do it in abatement, and that has always come back to the board. And it's like, we've tried to do that, but it's really expensive. And so it's like, we're a lot of, you know, we think we have a big stick, but we don't want to pay for the stick.
But maybe
So we have a little
the,
twig.
maybe the first half of what we just talked about for half an hour is fine. Maybe that part we leave alone. We call it a different title, a representative or a liaison.
Yeah.
We do a request for investigation form. Those parts,
Yeah, I
we'll
don't
just
really
tweak a
have
little
any,
bit,
yeah.
but I don't think that's where it's broken. It's the ending that's
Right.
broken. Which is kind of why the idea of the nuisance board of appeals utilize that board in a much different way than they have been. They've always been used for when someone appealed a decision that we made, and they appealed that I don't have trash. Well, yes, you do. But utilize them more like the city of Goldendale does, where, okay, my liaison in health or my liaison in planning have worked with them. We've exhausted everything we can do, and now we're to the stick part. And that board helps us maybe with a stick of, okay, you've got 30 days or you're getting fined this amount, or you've got 60 days or whatever. I'm just throwing that out there because that's kind of how they do it.
And on that part of this matter, I would throw up two questions. One is, do you want the actual person that complained to have to show up to that nuisance board and lodge their complaint? That would end the whiny neighbor syndrome because they wouldn't want to show up.
But if they're scared, they could potentially
You-
have
you
a
could have
representative.
Harassment.
And second
But a
matter of that
representative
is,
could
do
come
you
into
want the
place.
nuisance board actually levying fines? Or do you want to keep that in your wheelhouse? So that's the two things I saw when that one was talked about. I don't personally have a problem with the nuisance board levying fines if they're legally allowed to, which we would need to check. And as long as they were small enough increments that I didn't think that there was going to be some issue there. But I'm open either way on either kind of, I can blow in any direction on that.
You know, and again, we're just throwing stuff out there to see, let's try some new ideas, you know, because we've had 2.5 years of discussions of kind of tweaking the really old version. Let's maybe twist our thinking just a
And
skosh
that's
and
where I like the
settle
nuisance-
somewhere in between.
That's where I like the nuisance board, because instead of just code complying, sending a letter from, oh, code compliance constantly, now you have to go before a board. That kind of seems like a court. You know, it's gonna be a stick without being a stick, because people are gonna think, ooh, this is a bigger deal than it, you know.
And the city board that I sit on, the person who complained doesn't have to be there, but the one who has the case against them does have to be there. And the board is there, and then the code enforcement person is there. And then whomever else is involved, maybe it's a road thing, so a guy from Public Works or whatever the case is for the city. Those are the people that are there for that discussion. And then we can say, okay, in the case of the city, it's Jeff. You know, Jeff has tried to work with you. You still have a yard full of junk and hazardous materials. We're giving you 60 days, and then we're gonna revisit this, and he's gonna let us know if you've done it or if you haven't done it. And if you have, then we'll say it's good, you're done. And if not, we're gonna say, okay, we discussed this fine of this amount, now this fine is being assessed because you didn't do it. I mean, that's kind of the process they use.
Yes, sir.
So I break this down, there's nuisance and there's code. And they're close and intertied, but they're different.
They
You
are.
have, I don't know, probably 100+ people at least in this county that are living in a non-code compliant building, whether it's a shop or something. How do we get that? The certificate of non-compliance, that's something that can be filled out and you can put it on the title, or you can put it so that when the next person brings up the title report,
They're
They-
aware of it.
they're aware of it. Are you going to find these people per day, per month for living in this place that's not up to code? That's our main decisions on the board. Where do we want these things to be? Are we there to be a stick for situations like this, or are we there to, this is gonna end sooner or later, and when it does end, the new people need to know about it. when they
Right,
come in.
and then maybe on some of those, it's not as much of a fine thing because they're gonna keep living there, but we're filing their certificate of non-compliance, so if they go to sell it, the new buyer isn't blindsided.
Right.
Right.
And I'm looking at it that code violations, we're not sending you to the nuisance board. The nuisance board to me is more trash, garbage, cars, not you put a chicken coop in, you know, that isn't permitted. I would think we should be able to write something in there that a code violation is handled this way and a ordinance violation is handled this way,
But a lot of codes are ordinances in a way, because like if they're violating, say, my Title 15 stuff and they're living in a special outbuilding and somebody complains about it and they say, no, I'm not gonna make it a house and get engineering and all that, I can just simply file a certificate of non-compliance, give them X amount of time, they say no. Okay, but then when you sell it, the buyer will know.
Right, and that's what I want to happen. I don't want it to go before the nuisance board and 5 civilians start fining them $1,500 a day or something.
This is more of the 40 cars and the
That's what I'm looking at.
2.5 acres of junk and no septic system.
So, all right. Come on, Dave, how do you want it? What are you thinking?
I was thinking topic's a big headache.
It is, and it's mostly a big headache because the real issue with all of it is I think there's a lot of thought given to the existing system. The problem is about resources. It's not about the process. I think it can be onerous. It can be, but if we wanted to put resources towards doing it, it'll work the way it is. It did work before for the most egregious
Before
problem.
things got so expensive.
Before it got so expensive. When we talk about abatement, I think, the code stuff where there's folks, because we know there's people that are not, and we don't find them. We never have fined them. We try to get them in compliance, but we ultimately, there's things that we're not going to do. If you're, like you said, if somebody's living in their outbuilding, that's not only, that they could also be, it's a zoning violation because there's actually, there's a house and an outbuilding.
And health.
And
Because
health,
you don't know
because
that
they
they
don't
put in a
have, and
septic.
so we
Yeah.
generally have tried to, unless it's really like public safety, we're not gonna fine people into compliance, and we just file the notice so that in the future, it's buyer beware. You understand when you buy that place, that house and the outbuilding is not legal, and you're accepting that, and we just kind of go on our way, and we don't worry about that. I don't really see a problem with that, just keeping the status quo on that. The problem is this really is more about the nuisance stuff, where it's the garbage, the trash, and they won't clean it up, and that we either have to decide we have a stick or we don't have a stick. And I'd say I'm conflicted on the board, the nuisance board, just because I worry, I don't know, and I would be really curious what the legal department has to say as far as the ability to pass fines. We're the legislative authority. We can do it because but I'm assuming there must be, if the city of Goldendale is doing it, there must be some way to delegate that authority one way or the other to be able to do that. Would be too is where are we gonna get these citizens that want to even do this? I mean, I kind of go back to some of this, and I'm being up.
Well, she's one of them in Goldendale, so they're there.
Yeah, I guess. So it is possible.
It is possible.
It is possible to get people to do this.
There's one in our file.
Yeah.
Or we stick to our old version. And
No, I mean, I think our old version doesn't work. It's
Yeah.
not working. It hasn't worked. And I know you're right. We've been talking about it for 2.5 years. It's a source of frustration for you because you're the one left holding the bag. So when
And I
things don't get
still-
done and you don't want to do it
Yeah.
anymore.
I still have people from Dallasport and other areas calling me, chewing me out regularly
I know.
because I haven't seen anything done yet. And I
Right.
complained 5 years ago.
Right.
I know You know, I
know,
mean, what
I
am
know.
I supposed to say?
I heard that complaint in my last fire meeting, believe it or not. I'm like,
Not
hey, I'm not
surprised.
even working right now.
Oh, you're always working.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
first thing you learned.
And do you want me to still hold off on hiring Frank's replacement, or do I need to advertise and get someone in there and have them help fix this? I mean,
Honestly,
I
if you
haven't
tell me
yet.
it's fixed, I'm not.
No, because we don't know what,
Exactly,
we don't know
because
what we're
how do
doing.
I tell that person what their job is?
Exactly.
But, I mean, I recognize we got to get off the dime and we got to make a decision what we're gonna
Say,
do.
you know, they're all good ideas and I don't know any one of them is gonna work more than any other one. We just need to get around to getting it done. Yes, the biggest issue is the stick. That's the cost of compliance or the cost of abatement. Like I said, I've been working on that part, and I think if we, you know, throw a workshop together or talk to some of those individuals, we're gonna find that price comes way down. Just by handling that little piece of it different. So if you're thinking is that is the main issue, then the rest of this should be able to just be, yeah, whip through this and that, and we'll work on
And do we
that.
give the draft to the PD's office so that they can mark it up and say what's legal and what's not?
That would be really helpful for me to understand, I think, because I don't want to consider something that's
Right,
probably
I didn't want to waste their
Yeah,
time
no, no, I
though, you
totally
know,
get that.
because I know he's super busy.
busy too. Everybody's
Yeah.
busy.
I do think it's going in the right direction. And that, one other thing to note in here, the way it's written up is that if this is passed, that all of the current code compliance nuisance, all of that, just that folder just goes, and we're starting from a clean slate.
That's if we want to, or we can keep the old ones open
Yeah, I
and
saw
try to
that
fix
and
them.
I figured we were gonna have a discussion on that. I mean, I can see the pros and cons to both ways. but
Exactly, I just kind of threw it out there.
I'm kinda open to opinion.
Right.
Because we have some super old cases that, how are we gonna get fixed? But if we can get costs down, you know, but one specific one in Dallas Fort, he's always on me because the house next to him it's dilapidated, I mean, but we don't tear down structures, and I tell him that, we don't tear down structures. So then what do you do with those? No, it's being used for storage, and out front is a whole bunch of cars.
Is the structure a health concern or a fire hazard?
Probably not necessarily either yet. All the windows are intact, but the roof is old and it is losing shingles and things like that. And then there's a lot of debris inside of it and cars and stuff outside of it. He would like all of it cleaned up and have it be a vacant lot. And I said, we can't do that. You know, so you're always gonna have those people
You can
that,
buy it and do that.
yeah,
I don't
exactly,
say I'm
have at
not-
it,
If
but
it ain't a, if
There's
it
a
ain't
problem.
health hazard or a
Fix it.
fire hazard or whatever, shut up and look at it, dude, move. You know, not your babysitter.
I mean, you're always gonna have those, and you probably know who I'm talking about, because he says he's called you.
Anyway, I'll say it's great.
You know, I mean, so there's gonna just plain be some things we can't
He's
fix.
been set straight several times.
Yeah, we can't fix everything.
People, all of us hear what we want to hear.
I think you're gonna get a lot of negative feedback if you just drop all the old ones.
So we can take that part out. I can remove that portion of verbiage. And we'll just keep trying and, you know, whittle away at those.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, are we good with at least sending it over to the draft with?
But you want me to take out the,
Probably the dropping the old ones, I
Okay.
think that's, I mean, I see the, part of me is like, oh yeah, it'd be nice just to,
well, and start with a clean slate,
Yeah.
but
case number one.
Back to the start of our conversation, the clarification says they're going to pass it off to the other departments and the other departments. Are you both saying that you don't want to do it that way? You want to go
I
back to
don't,
the
I
original way?
don't know that I just don't know what that means, what it's to pass it off as far as, does that mean?
maybe I just say get more.
I think the problem is that
specific
there's
input.
not, it sounds like if I'm reading between the lines, it's that there has been, you know, the complaint comes in, the compliance officer, this is a septic thing issue. I try to go, you know, and I want the health department to really pay attention to the health department's busy. They maybe give them some technical advice, but ultimately, it's like, it's not my problem.
Or-
You're the compliance
Right, my
officer.
worry is
That's
that
kind of a good reading.
that
Right,
health is
okay.
answering it via,
We want to get away from that.
as
It's
like,
like-
for example, they're answering the questions via RCWs here, and letting Frank interpret the RCWs. That's what I think you have a problem.
But if they can give us verbiage for their letter, that would help, say, here's our verbiage, here's our standard letter.
Make a statement, not pass on your RCW. for
Something
Frank to
along
make
that
the
line would
legal
be helpful.
interpretation. That's my work.
We want to talk about fines. It's at the bottom of that thing. It says $100 to $1,500. Is that a one-time fine? Is that a monthly fine, a yearly fine?
And that would be something to be decided, per case perhaps.
Well, what's the legal remedy now?
3 citations,
I know when you go to
Which,
court,
yeah. And after the 3 citations, they get a certificate of non-compliance. The 3 citations add up to, the top of my head, like $450.
And if I remember right, the citation amount is the same for each citation. There's no progression.
It goes up.
Is there a
Yeah,
progression?
it's like the first one, I mean, like, I haven't looked
right,
at it,
but
but like,
whatever it is.
say 75 and then whatever, and then whatever, I mean,
150 and then
whatever they are.
250.
But it doesn't add up to a ton
More
of
than
money.
450.
And then after we've done the 3 citations, whether they get thrown out or paid, however it goes, then it's a certificate of non-compliance, and then we're done. And so it doesn't matter if they have
Right.
further complaints, we've exhausted our abilities and we're done.
You brought up fines. What's your opinion of fines?
Well, that's why I said there's a difference between code compliance and there's a difference between nuisance. And we need to have some sort of a flow chart that shows which direction, which path you're going
Right.
down. And whether it goes through the nuisance board to make a decision on fines, and we give them leeway to determine a fine. But still, in order to be equitable, you still need a flow chart of those things.
I like that idea.
I have no solution for you.
Or maybe I'll just start on this one by tweaking it a little bit based upon the discussion.
I like flow chart. Make a note.
Kind of do the flow chart thing, give it to the P's office to read through, to do the legality parts
Yeah,
of everything.
I'm especially interested in the nuisance board
Issuing fines.
and issuing
Right,
fines as
right,
far
and
as
get
that.
their intake.
That's
I
right.
mean,
on it.
generally speaking, I want to,
That's me.
I don't want to defer, I don't want to delegate to somebody. That's
Well,
I would
that's,
love to delegate.
that's why when I originally
Oh, here
brought up
I'm-
the board,
Ooh.
I wanted the board to make a recommendation for fine to. us.
Right, which could be,
So
I mean,
then
maybe
we have
they're,
the power
The
to actually
ultimate-
enforce that, raise it, lower
Right.
it, whatever the board recommended. That's up to us, not to the board.
so maybe the
That was my
nuisance,
original
the
thought.
nuisance board makes a recommendation.
Right.
So I can
That's
say
a better-
recommend.
Yeah,
Power
that,
back
that,
in the board.
that makes me feel more comfortable.
Or
But I would be
recommend
curious
to
what
the VOCC.
I mean, if they're just doing minor fines, I don't necessarily have too much of a problem with that. But if they're gonna start instituting actual dollar amount, bigger stuff, I think we need to take the responsibility for that one.
But we could just have all of it be that if we utilize a nuisance board, that they make the recommendation
Recommendation,
to.
And then if Frank can show up and say, hey, the board said we needed to fine this guy $50, he presents his case to us and we say yes or no.
So I'll do some tweaking, give it to the PA's office so they can review and provide the input of what's legal, what's not legal. And then we can schedule another workshop.
Okay.
Okay,
You're good with that?
Let's move on.
all right.
Actually, Brent,
I would
You said
also
this was the
say-
easy one.
That's
I would
why I
say-
laughed.
Not so
I just
bad.
brought it up.
I would say future workshops sooner rather than later, because I think we stretch these things out so far.
Right.
We tend to forget
I think the PA's office needs 3
some of the
weeks,
finer
so
details that we were talked about a month and a half ago. So, just an opinion.
yeah, I'll just have to see what their time frame is.
Oh, yeah, no.
I think they typically want 3 weeks if I can
He's on his own time frame. We're on after that.
Alrighty. The RVs next.
Sure.
Save short-term rentals for
Yeah, all
that.
the easy stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, that one's way easier.
So I included the replies I got from planning and environmental health regarding the RV placements so that you guys would have those directly from the departments to read through. Basically, it's just a brief draft of verbiage relating to hardships, a draft application for a hardship permit, and that's as far as I took it for now. Just kind of short and
You
sweet.
can go first if you want.
I love it when I go first. Looking at your terms of approval. I go down to number 5 and it says sanitation and water should be approved by the environmental health department. I want water removed off there since in health department's own worded, she's not responsible for water on an RV. If he says he's not responsible for water on an RV, why are we making him responsible for water on an RV? So I personally would like to see water removed from that. The next one is property access shall be approved by the Public Works Department. So if some guy has a little desert piece of property somewhere that he's got an RV on, are we gonna send Gordy out there to make him comply with road standards to put in an approach
You're
on
not
that?
in
Is
Public
that
Works.
realistic? Or are we opening a can of worms that we really don't want to open on that? Those are the first two I'll start
Right.
with.
And if they're not worried about it, great, we'll take it off. But I wasn't sure what
What he doesn't know doesn't hurt him.
what level, for the other departments.
Uh-oh.
So,
We have the one in Lyle, if everybody remembers. It depends on where they're positioned. When they get in approach, we like to have permits, because they could be entering and exiting from the pad where they have no sight.
So it becomes a safety issue.
Right, and I get that, but I guess my point is I think most of these people are poor, park their camper on a junky piece of property. I mean, there's gonna be some that aren't the case. And don't even have a driveway, it's just dirt straight from the road across the ditch and onto their property. If we send you guys out there, you're gonna find a whole bunch of problems on most of these, and if that's what we're looking for, hey, fine, but I see it opening a can of worms.
I kind of agree with you because a good approach now runs what, $15,000 on average to build a good approach up to the road.
Depends on the road.
But up to a county road, you're looking $15,000. They don't even have $150 there.
That's my point, is every person that applies is now gonna have a nuisance complaint filed because they don't have a valid approach.
but see, that's up to Public Works to say take out number 7, or you to say take out number 7.
Well, that's why I just brought it
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I
I
just,
brought up water.
I just
want
put a whole
water
bunch of
removed,
junk in
and
there.
I wanna know if my
Gordy,
seatmates think number 7 is realistic or.
And it's, approaches are kind of they're the one thing, there's actually a $25 fine in the state statute. And it's the one thing in our code that's also reflected in the state law that you have to have a permit to make a connection to a county road, state highway. It's one of those things that is a safety, can be a real safety concern, not just for the person that uses it and pulls off, but the traveling public. And so it is the one thing that I'll have to say that we're really on top of. And we try to get people to come into some kind of compliance with a permit. So we get it in the right place. It's not just safe for them, but for the public that travels the road.
I
And
get it.
the expensive ones are if we have a paved road, that's where you have to have a paved apron.
right.
We have about 600 miles of pavement and about the same in gravel, so.
I just think if you're gonna put that on here as an approval for terms, you might as well just quit working on this now and throw it in garbage. Because nobody's gonna comply because they can't afford that. So.
Like, I get that, but I also, there are standards and I would say there's an equity piece as far as why, because I'm building a house and I go in and get a building permit. So now you're saying, well, economics, I'm on the hook for the $15,000, but if I just drug a trailer house, a RV in there, I don't have to pay anything, and I still get access to the road. I understand the problem we're trying to solve, but I don't know. And there is the safety, the expense is, as you said, it's that onto that improved, the paved road is because a driveway doesn't cost $15,000 unless you have to actually build with the hard surface, however far it's paved back so far. And I know we've had some pushback on that over the years because it's expensive when you're like, well, geez, we used to just, put the culvert in and gravel up to the road and off we go. And that might be something we have a discussion. Maybe there is because that approach standard as far as the construction piece of it, we control that. That's not a state law. It's the state law part of it is the way I read it. It's about the safety, making sure people are getting onto the road in a place that's not endangering other people driving on the road. And that absolutely, we need to make people do that because I get you can't afford it, but that doesn't give you the right to pull out and get hit or me hit you because you're coming in on a blind corner because that's the only place that you want to do it. No. We can have a discussion about, does it have to be a paved, that standard? Because the reason we went to that was because the argument that it causes damage to the road. And so we need to protect the public's asset. And that's why we make people have a hard surface.
Right, I guess my argument is, let's say they have a property that they're just cutting straight off the road across the gravel and onto their cattle pasture full of sagebrush. Right. If they're entering on a blind corner right now and we say, well, can you do that over there? Sure, they would cross over there. But I think if you're trying to have them build something in either location, you're going to have zero compliance. You're just going to have zero compliance. And if that's the stickler, then that's fine. I just don't think you're going to get most of the people living in their trailers to afford $2,000 for gravel to put in a culvert. And they're just going to continue to do what they're doing and not comply and let you issue a fine.
I guess the other thing here is that this is temporary. This is not, a full road. This is not their permanent residence. This is supposed to be temporary. It's issued annually. I think that if Public Works and everybody understands the goal here, we're sitting in a situation where we need to do as best we can for the situation. We want to get them as close, because nothing that they're doing is going to be fully, they're living in a trailer for God's sake. They're not going to be up to county spec standards on anything, let alone probably potable water. But they're currently living there, and we need to get as close to legal as we possibly can so that we have some sort of A, know where they're at, B, services can get to them if there is an issue, and it's C, we can get as much safety and sanitation as we can.
And we know where they are in the future, so we can possibly help reach out with other programs to help them, is where I'm coming from. And my worry is I don't know that with something like this, if Gordy can go out there and go, oh, well, yeah, no, we cannot do the gravel. Just throw your driveway in over there, because that's against his own thing. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's.
So do we think, I'm just throwing this out there, property access location shall be approved by Public Works, and then have some kind of statement after that that says at the time that they build, they have to be in full compliance or something along that line. I'm just
all of that.
throwing stuff out there.
Some way for them to achieve compliance without having to open up a wallet they don't have. They have to open up a wallet they don't have. You're never going to get them to fill it. They're going to read this and go, I'm not even filling it out. And then you got nowhere. You don't know who they are.
I know, but do we necessarily want to encourage people? I'm fine. I understand what we're trying to fix. I get that. I want to be able to do that, but you need to understand that if we lessen the requirements, if we publicize that we've lessened the requirements, we are going to encourage people to come here, bring their RVs and start camping out on, people's land. And that's, if that's the policy direction we want, I'm fine with that. But understand, we're trying to fix something over here that we're talking about helping our people, but we are going to be.
I'm just telling you from a private standpoint, I would do it anyway, and I wouldn't be doing your road, I'd have my trailer on it, and you can find me for it.
Right.
And
And until we got a complaint, nobody would care.
But then again, it comes back to the complaint part, that we do get a complaint, they're out of
I'm sure if we
compliance.
drove around, I'm sure there's, as we've said, there's
A lot.
hundreds of them that are out of compliance today as we sit here.
Or do we just simply say that's not a violation and take that verbiage out of the other parts and not have something specific? I don't know.
I just think that one, I think the water shouldn't be there because it's not a health issue by Washington statute. And I'm not somebody that wants to institute something more than what a Washington statute is. I just think this one is one heck of a speed bump in achieving the final goal of what we're trying to accomplish.
Which is what exactly? Just so I understand.
Well, you said you just did it.
No, I don't. Sometimes I think we have a solution looking for a problem, but I'm not.
I
Well,
think
no, I do. I want to understand what is the problem that we're trying to
The
solve,
way-
other than having so that Lynn doesn't get so many complaints.
right.
No,
I mean,
That
let's get to what the real problem,
No, I don't.
That was a
I don't
little
look
bit
at
of
that
it,
at all.
I think.
The
which
other
is a
thing-
legitimate problem to be solved.
The other thing that's not in here that I discussed on the first thing was I want to have their annual permit based on inspection of the property to make sure they're not acquiring garbage.
Okay.
So in facilitating these people, you're going to be able to find them, you're going to know where they are for future outreach, but you're also going to be gaining access to help, hopefully keeping them under compliance, because they have to stay under nuisance compliance in order to get this little cheapo permit. It's, I guess I'd say you're offering a carrot.
Okay.
And that's,
Well,
versus
then-
right now, they're living illegally and just throwing their garbage over in the corner and dumping their septic out in the dirt. If we have a little bit of a carrot there, they might throw the trash away so they can get the permit next year.
Right, the revocation kind of has some of that verbiage. Failure to maintain property, failure of proper handling and disposal of solid waste, nuisances, and a repeated occupancy of multiple RVs shall result in revocation of the temporary hardship permit. I mean, that's kind of in there.
Right, no,
We
there
can
is.
tweak it for sure,
Sure.
but
I mean, and there's hardship permits, people living on their trailer in a house as well. So there's somebody in the house and there's somebody in the RV, and the property is a dump. If the permit for the RV had some relation to an inspection that you better keep your garbage cleaned up, you might actually get more compliance on the garbage cleanup. That's where I'm kind of focusing.
and aside from lessening the complaint factor, I think some of it, the idea behind it was to maybe some people who have fallen on hard times financially or are struggling to make it on Social Security have a little bit of dignity intact of providing themselves a place to live.
Sure.
That I mean, they still deserve dignity.
Sounds like we're all coming from a different angle and it just all kind of meet in the middle.
I don't think we're all coming from a different angle. I think Lynn did a great job writing this thing up. I think that we're all gonna have to be a little flexible when it comes to how this is managed, and that we all understand the direction we're heading to try to give some of these people dignity. That was one of the things that I brought up to begin with, is that, and I wanted the situation with the carrot and the stick. You get a permit, you gain dignity, but there's a stick, it means you keep the place cleaned up. If you don't keep the place cleaned up, you get the stick, which is you're now in non-compliance. And now we're gonna have to put this on your title report that, you're in non-compliance for living there. And there's a cost associated with filing that, and there's a cost associated with unfiling that. Just keep your property clean.
And that's why that's my road issue, is I feel if they don't want to apply because they can't come up with that, and they can't come up with $3,000 to fix the road, we no longer have the cut to try to get them to keep their property cleaned up.
But I do think Public Works at least needs to have the ability to give us the input to say, why on earth you can't put that there, because you're gonna be just getting smacked from both directions.
I would love to have that part of it on there, yes.
Gordy, did you have something?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's more than that. There are some things that are safety things, and as a professional, a licensed professional, I would be negligent in my duty of care.
Right.
For the citizens of the county to do that, and it would open us up. And it opened me up personally. I could lose my license.
Right, that's
So
why I
have
said
to-
if we have you happen to inspect it, you've got to
Yeah.
go with what you need to go with, which is more than what they can afford, so it won't get done.
But if we take it off of there, do we
Then
still
unless
assume,
somebody complains about the approach, he doesn't know about it.
but do we still assume a liability of letting them put it wherever they want? I
couldn't
don't
let
know.
them Put
I'm-
anything anywhere.
You know, I don't know. That's not my area of knowledge, so.
This was gonna be fun getting through the prosecutor's office.
Yeah. That's a good question right there.
That's why these are
Do we
hard
assume
things.
any
Exactly.
liability for not
Yeah.
making sure they don't have a road approach? I mean, if we assume liability, again, we might as well just take this and throw it in the garbage, because they're not doing. A lot of them are.
Well,
See,
and that's the thing, is if you're giving a permit, you are assuming liability.
Yeah.
If we don't have a permit, we have more cover about, because some folks argue, well, you should have done something and you didn't. But if you're giving them a permit, if you're giving them a hardship permit or whatever, you are assuming the liability of everything that goes with that
Or do we remove the 30 and 60-day verbiage
and not worry about it.
and not worry about it?
I like the idea of having some carrot, I think for that segment of I think there's probably lots of folks that are living in their RV and they have a nice clean place, but for whatever reason, they get crosswise with their neighbor who doesn't like them doing that. And then you get the call and technically right now, they are out of compliance. It's not a question of trash or even approach or any of that kind of stuff. It's just that, they are out of compliance. Their neighbor doesn't like it. And it puts us in the position of, you can't get along with your neighbor and now we're drawn into it. I think that's a different situation than someone that's living in an RV and they're a bad neighbor and it's a bunch of crap around, which in and of itself is a violation. It doesn't matter if they were living in an RV or not.
Or a house
Or a
anything.
house or anything. It's not. And so I like the idea. I do like the carrot part of that, is that for you to stay in compliance, we get to every year, but then you run into that. If we're giving you permission to do this, that comes with everything, which includes that road approach. Yes, Commissioner Anderson.
I guess right now, how many road approaches do we have? I mean, these people are already living there, they're already there, they're already getting onto the road one way or another. How many of those road approaches do we have in the county that are either grandfathered in or don't meet your current specs?
Yeah, so new ones, so if they're old and they've been there, that's where they have always been, and we don't do anything. If somebody goes in there and puts a new one in, it doesn't take long, and it comes to our attention, and then we take care of it, and we get it permitted. That's
Okay,
kind of how it works.
so I guess for me to manage this whole situation is that if they're putting this hardship trailer on a road that's already there, it's already attached, which they probably are, they're not coming out here and putting something new. The permit would go through and you'd be like, it's grandfathered in, it's fine,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, it's there.
So-
We might have them get a permit, which is a paper exercise, and we move on.
Okay, so,
As
so
long
that
as
I'm
you
good with,
know our want is for you to facilitate as much as possible.
Yeah.
but,
Then, okay.
but if they're coming and they're
Okay.
applying for this permit saying they want to stick their trailer on their piece of property that they got handed down to them or bought or whatever, and they want a new permit, new approach, then you're gonna have to meet the new approach standards, because, but as long as, and most of these, I would assume are going on places that road's probably been there for 50 years that they're currently going on anyways.
And then it's likely I don't even know about it, because it's been there, nothing's changed.
Right. I have some of both.
But, you know, a building.
No,
permit-
I permitted the new ones. I've gone through the paperwork, but I also have ones that have been active that were there probably before they built the highway.
Said I've drove
And
off
those
the
are
road,
illegal.
crossed the ditch a few times to get to
Sure.
property.
But
Those are legal.
I cannot issue a building permit, a placement permit, anything like that unless Gordy's department's able to sign off.
Right.
We're kind of that last leg of making sure Gordy has what he needs, health has what they need.
But we
planning
do
has what they
permit,
need.
like I'm trying to think when I got my latest, on my house, I was using the existing driveway that was already there and it was not, and I went through the paper exercise so that I could get my
Mhm.
building permit, but it was utilizing a driveway that was, 75 years old. And so it was perfectly legal and it met site standards anyway, but even if it hadn't, they would have signed off on it probably because it was
Well, yeah.
pre-existing.
Our,
Maybe
our,
not.
our responses a lot of times will come back from Gordy's department
Right.
saying existing roadway
Exactly.
or private road, not applicable, however it is.
Right.
So, or, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we've talked about just going back to state standards and going out and all those old approaches.
Just
going right in
making them right. Here's your
Just have
permit.
them,
Yeah.
so anything new, we'll know it's new,
Right.
Yeah.
so.
So
So
with
I
that,
guess if we leave it in, what we're saying is most of the people are gonna qualify without having to pay thousands of dollars. A few might fall through the cracks, but, okay. So with that and with the guidance I think Gordy's just received, I'm fine with leaving that in as long as you guys are fine with taking out the water statement on number 5. Okay,
Kavanaugh, are you there on the phone?
Did you say Kavanaugh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you, yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so we're talking about removing, 0.5 sanitation and water shall be approved by the environmental health department. And Dan's talking about taking that out for these RVs,
The water part.
the water part.
the water for the temporary RVs, because you have it in your RCWs that you sent over that proof of potable water is only applied to building permit, and if they want, I just want to live in my RV on my parents' brother's sister's property, end quote. You just need proof of wastewater disposal, not potable water. So
Yeah, the only time potable water is actually applied is during that building code, which is the RCW you quoted.
Okay, I don't have.
So with that, if he's not legally by state statute has to check for potable water, I don't want to add it to it.
Well, I guess, let me clarify, if Blaine is applying the building code to any of her temporary RV permits or any part of her ruling, then our requirements would come in. But if we're not applying any type of to it, then it would be null.
Right, so if they're putting an RV on their property because they're building their house, they gotta go through a different set of circumstances through Lynn, and then yes, potable water does apply under that circumstance.
Correct.
Then it's a building permit.
This is, we're not building a house. So in
Correct.
that case, potable water doesn't apply, and so that's all I want to remove is on this one, not on that
But the septic will be in there, so
Correct.
they need a plan on how they're gonna deal with their solid waste.
And,
We want-
and
Whether it's
David's
an
department will have
incinerator
to
toilet or
approve
whatever.
that. Right.
Or hauling it offsite or whatever, I wouldn't know. So anyway, with that the way it is, let's see if we can,
You want me to give-
agree to remove water from there.
Do you want me to refine it and give it to the PA for review?
Can I get one more off of it? On your violations, pretty much the first sentence just sounds weird to me. there's gotta be some way to reword that. It just,
Well, it probably is.
I read it like 5 times to Sunday and it just sounds weird. So just take that for a note to go look at it later and think of a way to make it unsound weird.
You do have the prosecutor coming on.
The only thing I had, other thing I made a note of was what about the permit fees? Were you guys okay with those fees or?
Yeah, I just kind of threw out a number.
And that would go through my list of what I had notes on anyway.
There is the no temporary hardship permit shall be approved with an active nuisance case. So the way I read that is if somebody's already turned you in for having an RV and living in it, and you have a current active case and we haven't redone it, there's no way you can get allowed. So we have to think about that.
Think about that. I was thinking, when I wrote that, I was thinking more along the lines of,
Trash.
yes, a trash nuisance complaint, that sort of thing. Clean up
Get
your
that
trash and
clipped
then
and
we'll
then
let
come back and
you.
we'll talk.
Exactly, that's,
Yeah.
So
but I'll have to work on that
Reword that
verbiage.
to trash and
Mhm.
good call.
That was what I was thinking.
And also in your, if you're gonna remove the water part in your hardship application, you have to clean that language up too, because it's in there. As far as I will have proper sanitation and potable water as approved by the environmental health
on the
department,
application.
Yeah.
on the actual application.
Yep.
Okay.
And on the actual application, under the first line, it says, I understand only one RV will be allowed on my private residence. You need to add the word occupied.
Oh,
Right, so we were clear. 'cause you can
Right,
add- You want to park one out there.
yeah,
that's fine.
when occupied, yep.
I would like to see, we did remove potable water.
Mhm.
I would like to see another line on there that they have to check that says that they will use potable water. Not that we're going to enforce it, but I
Right.
would like to at least plant the seed.
I think that might be a bit confusing though for applicants if we are requiring them to find a source of potable water, but not requiring them to have one on the property. Because you're also getting into water rights issues where they're also pulling their water from. Are they pulling from their neighbors? It's potable water that's approved as by the health department, or where are we getting our water at that point?
Good point.
Right, if they want to drink out of the creek, that's their business. I don't care.
Don't tell,
Just don't tell me.
Maybe they want to live in a chicken coop.
So don't add that line.
Yeah, take that off.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Kavanaugh.
No problem.
I just want to make sure that planning will not be a part of this RV process.
No, you're doing it all.
What's
What's that?
I just want to be sure because we are treating that like a vehicle. There's no zoning rules talk about parking. a
Right,
vehicle.
originally Lynn
Right.
thought that the permits would be issued from the planning department, but it sounds like planning has no oversight. So they don't
Right.
necessarily want it. I think it should be tied to whoever has a nuisance.
I think it could be a great job for the code liaison position.
That's what I'm saying, whoever has a
Oh,
nuisance.
yeah, I
Because
mean-
that's,
And so do we want to take number 6 out? Is that what?
the permits are issued by nuisance compliance.
No,
officer.
number 6 is saying that they need to be approved by planning. So do I need to route it to planning and Mochi can just simply say that they don't
I
address
don't have
RVs?
any jurisdiction, so I can sign off or.
So there's really no reason to
So
route it.
Okay.
for the temporary placement
So
on
take
the
that off.
application, the planning department approval, take that off,
Okay,
Mochi. Because we know if Mochi has to see it, well, it's gonna take a lot longer.
She's gonna need a CEQA.
okay.
You're off the hook.
I just
Building
wanna make sure
public
I'm not
works.
stalling anything. Be clear. Yeah, thank you.
And then number 13, I put in there because the last time we talked in here, you said you wanted something addressed about a whole bunch of junk RVs sitting there. And so I
Well,
kind
that
of,
was the part of the rechecking yearly to
Mhm.
make sure they don't have all this other junk.
yeah,
I wanted a yearly
Who's
Check
gonna
up.
who's gonna do that?
code compliance officer,
And there's-
who's also
there's,
issuing the permit for the trailer.
that liaison person.
That liaison.
They're gonna be busy.
We're gonna give them some work.
they'll have enough work. I have a pile I've been saving.
I don't think there's gonna be a ton of these, and that also gives them the time to go out there and knock on the RV door, say hi, and here's you're due for your permit again. I wanted to hand you the application to turn in your new permit, and while doing so, they're looking at the property they're walking around.
I would leave that, whether it needs to be an on-site review of that application to the department head and based on theirs, I would require that we have to go out to every one of them. It's a massive amount of time that could be spent on it, depends on how many you have. And you'll know if you have an issue, or you can have.
There'll be a complaint.
Because there'll be a complaint, you'll know.
So do you want it written in there that there could be a on-site review,
There,
but not that there shall be an on-site
there
review?
may be,
Maybe subject to on-site review.
yes.
Yeah, no, okay, but,
I like that. That was what I was getting at. Who's gonna do this? Like there's a lot of,
we'll get to it.
that's not my department. I'm too
Could
busy
be.
talking on my phone apparently, so.
I'll throw something in there somewhere about that. Okay.
Much better.
Lynn, thank you so much. You've done so much work on this. This is exactly.
I'm just trying to help.
A lot of people have needed, and hopefully this will reduce the number of
Yeah.
regular complaints that we get.
Well, you gave me the task. I'm trying to.
Doing great. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, now for the easy one,
Yeah,
right?
the
I don't know if that's easy or not, but.
I said it was the easy one. I just said it would probably be the hardest.
So short-term rentals, we get plenty of questions in all of the departments. A lot of our pre-sub meetings relate to short-term rentals. I did research on my end and found that a lot of jurisdictions do not enforce the sprinkler code because it's not considered enforceable until it becomes a venue type situation. As long as it's a single family home with a safety plan, fire extinguishers, et cetera, that you don't have to apply it. That's not to say that removes all of the other departments' rules. I didn't speak to that at all in what I did. But I did include the response I got from planning and from environmental health. Kind of from our last topic or our last workshop, changed option 1 and option 2 a little bit of verbiage based upon the discussions we had a month ago. And then a draft of like an annual safety checklist, the application that they could fill out, a good neighbor guide, and then a short-term permit that they would get each year with the maximum occupancy listed, just to kind of get started on if we go that route, some of the forms that we, would need to utilize to have everyone be comfortable with it. Option 1 being mainly the verbiage that exists already at the state level with a few additions specific to us. Option 2 references the state and then is more,
Like Skamania.
yeah, utilizing Skamania and white salmon.
Right.
On the one Skamania, I think it was white salmon that had what was considered a dwelling that we had talked about before with the definitions, but I took out garbage disposal and put sleeping area because a lot of people in the country will not have garbage disposals because of septic systems. So I
They
figured, exactly. So I figured let's take that out.
You can talk to my wife.
They should.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
So it's a bad idea.
Plumber to replace a line right now. is a
Yeah,
bummer.
so I
Get rid of the
took that out.
Garbage disposal.
So that's that for now, and
Okay. So I guess I'll start off with yesterday. My phone, I spent most of the day with people from Klickitat and Skamania County because the Gorge 2020 update for the Gorge Commission, I was told last year that they had removed, they practically were going to put a ban on short-term rentals within the Gorge Commission bounds, blanket ban. And there was a big hubbub, and I was told that it got removed. Well, what was just signed by the Director of Department of Agriculture has rules in there that short-term rentals will be allowed, but the owner has to be on the premises, so you pretty much, you only get to rent rooms and not the whole thing. And then it also says you can only do it for 90 days out of the year, 90 room nights.
And this is inside the scenic
This
area.
is inside the scenic area. There's many short-term rentals that ruling is going to negatively affect it. That's going to push it into the cities and all the urban growth boundary areas. I talked with Christina, the head of the Gorge Commission, and she said her interpretation was that they don't have to be there on site, but it has to be their primary residence according to taxes. And so you can do it 90 days out of the year, but it has to be your primary residence. So if you have a house on Camino Island and a house down here, but your house on Camino Island is your primary residence for taxes, you're not allowed to short-term rental it. That's going to affect, again, multiple people within the bounds of the scenic area. And then everybody then wanted to talk about our draft. And so I was sending that, and all I got was really positive responses for the draft that Lynn has written up here. She said.
Which draft 1 or draft 2? Option 1 or option 2? Or both?
They actually, nobody said which.
I was gonna say they're rather
They're
similar, to
absolutely
be
different.
honest. Yeah, they're not too far off from each other.
But with that
Well,
being
the way
said-
they're worded now, you're correct. I don't believe they're that far off from each other.
Go ahead.
that was, I think, where I was going to end that piece at. But again, though, Lynn, thank you for working this up. I also talked with the Skamania County Commissioners, Tom and Bob, yesterday, and they haven't had any issues with their ordinance, how it's drafted up. They're really happy about the direction it's going. They're really worried about what the Gorge Commission just passed and upset that it wasn't high on, they didn't notice it either, they didn't catch it. But they said, they didn't, like us, they didn't have anything on the books, and people are filling it out and doing it, and they're getting information. So
I'm curious, Mochi, I don't want to put you on the spot, because as far as reviewed the scenic area stuff, I didn't necessarily interpret that towards short-term rental, that was overnight accommodations. Because there's a reference in there to the kind of 3 rooms, or I didn't know, I didn't interpret what they did as preventing, like if I have a house and I want to rent it, they don't have any jurisdiction. I mean, they don't, if I want to rent, if I don't want to be a bed and breakfast, but I want to rent a portion, then I could do the 90 nights or whatever it is in a year. So I'm curious, because I would have thought there would have been more uproar, because there was before, but I thought that was, so I'm gonna have to go back and revisit that.
yeah,
Yeah, I
so
don't have a response to that.
Yeah,
Christina did say that it does apply like to your whole house rentals. So your Airbnb overnighters.
and I guess when is something a short-term rental versus because they don't have, if I don't get a Gorge Commission permit to rent my house. If I have a house and I want to rent it, I can rent it. How do they know the Airbnb, the short term is the trigger? And I don't know what is that? Is it a month? Is it a week? Is it
I think it's a month.
a month? Any distance?
Right, I'm just trying to think when we do ADUs. we
No,
can
I'm just
add-
thinking from our own code. Yeah, as far as when
Right.
is something
For ADU, we say 60 days.
60.
Anything
60
less than
days. 60 days is a short term or okay.
That's kind of where I was wondering, was when we do the ADU pre-subs.
Because they're not going to be able to regulate, I mean, I can say whether I agree with that or not, but like if I want to rent my house, I can rent my house, and they can't, as long as I can't rent it a night here and a night there, then it's a short-term rental, and I can only do 90 of those. but they're not gonna be, whether I live in it or don't live in it, if I wanna rent my house for 4 months.
It would just all be out of compliance. They're not gonna stop.
Well, no, they're not gonna, well, I don't know. I mean, what will happen is, once that is adopted, there may be some, as far as with the, but, you know, Airbnb or whatever, because they do think, you know, that's why they're paying the lodging tax now. That's why, because they made them, they had to be in compliance with stuff. And those platforms may,
Shift their policy.
they may, so that may be a big issue then in the scenic area.
And the other thing about that scenic area designation is it's very limited in the zones that it's allowed in.
Right.
And so
Yeah, I know, it's almost nothing. It's only
it's a
recreation or residential down to
two,
yeah, something.
and like, so most of
There's
those,
probably about four places. The rest of them is not allowed at all.
it's not allowed at all, and that's all of your small agriculture
Right.
and all that, you know, wineries, everything.
Well, of course, we don't want anybody to make money in the scenic area.
So, sorry to get.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah.
I know.
I knew that.
You got his blood pressure up and I haven't on him yet.
Your thoughts?
Your thoughts,
on-
go ahead. Yes.
He knows it's coming. My thoughts is, I definitely don't like option 2. Which is pretty much Canadian. If you don't have a house, you don't qualify. And I have issues with the rewording of option 1. Because to me, option 1 is the state RCW, which, you know me, I don't like to add more crap in than what the state already has. But I look at confusion when you get down here to Klickitat County additional definitions, where we define nuisance, and then we define what a recreational vehicle is, and then we define what a short-term rental is as essentially a permitted structure. And then we have temporary structure. We list what a temporary structure is. To me, then short-term rental under the short-term rental agreement would only be what falls under short-term rental, which might as well be this community policy, because it doesn't include teepees, yurts, chicken coops, whatever else, because by definition of adding them under temporary structure, that doesn't make it a short-term rental. I personally would like to just see us use the term short-term rental and then sit here and go, do we think a house qualifies? Raise your hands. If 2 out of 3, write it down. Do we think a chicken coop qualifies? Nobody? Then a chicken coop don't qualify. And put down what we want to see in there and what we don't, and leave out what we don't want to see in there. Because to me, this is really no different than Skamania, because I don't think yurts, teepees, tree houses, none of that's in here.
So do you like one, if you include in there your teepees, tree houses as available as an option for a short-term rental? Would that be a simple change that would?
Well, I don't know how it's a simple change when you have it as a dwelling unit, and a dwelling unit has to have a refrigerator, a cooking facility, and a dishwasher. I don't know how you're getting those in a yurt and teepee. I don't know how you're getting smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms in a yurt or a teepee or a treehouse. Fire extinguisher, do we have to place it next to the door of the bedroom in a tent? How did all those things work, I guess? We need to determine whether a yurt is a temporary short-term rental. If it is, then put it on the list. And a yurt is a teepee, is a chicken coop. And then make accommodations for what we deemed as a board is or isn't. And I'm a kind of believer that I don't want to make it. I understand where Dave's coming from, where temporary dwelling could be 2 sheets of plywood propped up on a tree or a rope. And theoretically it could, but if we label what they are, and you didn't add 2 sheets of plywood and a rope, then it obviously isn't.
Well, we do have properly permitted structure, which would take out the 2 sheets of plywood.
Right, but if I wanted to put up a yurt for 1 month in the summer, would that be a properly permitted structure? Or would I have to build a base for the bottom of it and all the other hubbubby bubbub, which I don't think these people should have to do? To run a tent on their property.
So what's your
I
issue?
mean, I guess, yeah, what's the goal? Where are you trying to, what are you trying to get?
I think we had it, I think the RCW has essentially no restrictions in what is a dwelling unit. I think our,
No, I think
Definition.
dwelling unit has a definition.
In the building code. it
In the
does.
building code, dwelling unit has a definition, and it's not a yurt, it's not, well, it maybe
Can
can
be,
be.
but then it has to be
It has to
properly
meet that,
permitted.
it has to meet that criteria. It's not a tent, it's not a dwelling unit. A chicken coop is not a dwelling unit. It's, no, the RCW is, that's why they use the term dwelling unit. It has a definition in code, and and it does not include the things I think you want it to include.
And a treehouse can be a dwelling unit, but it needs to be properly
But it has to be
permitted.
properly
so
permitted by
under
the building
this,
code.
just for clarification, under either one of these, tents, tree houses, teepees, yurts,
Potentially, but only if they're properly permitted under the building code. You can get a building, you can do a yurt, you can do a tree
Right,
house.
and
you can
temporary
do-
structure could be short-term because that's unheated tents and you're under 500 square feet for recreational use. There's that verbiage that's exempt from a lot of the permits that I have.
Right.
so your definitions here of temporary structures doesn't exclude them from being a short-term rental.
Not in my mind, because I have the
See,
allowances.
Right, I read the short-term rental and this is what this is. And this
Right.
is a temporary structure, which kind of tells me it's not a
A month
short-term
ago,
rental.
when we were here, somebody wanted me to include what I could define as a temporary structure. And so then that's why I
That was
put
me.
that in there. Okay, I was gonna say, I can't remember who.
I was very uncomfortable with the term temporaries. What is that?
Right, and so that language is in the building code, but it has to be under 500 square feet. So if you put up a 2,000 square foot tent, that's not exempt as a temporary structure. Now it needs to meet building code. But the allowance is for those structures under 500 square feet that are unheated.
So minimum code requirements for safety of a temporary structure. Think of a glamping tent. What are considered those minimum code?
They want to know that the fabric has flame spread
Yeah.
properties, so that it's not gonna just go poof, things like that. That there's no cooking inside that tent structure, things like that.
Got it.
That would be the minimums that it does say, because you're not saying, oh, it has to have structural integrity, it has to have the foundation. You're just saying, okay, the fabric that you've made the tent out of, is it gonna just burst into flame? It has a fire retardant property to it. And that you're not gonna cook inside that tent because you don't want to melt it, things like that.
So in number 2,
Which one?
this option 2,
Okay.
I see in the definitions temporary structure, but where is the part that says a temporary structure can be used?
That's my question.
It seems like it would be up at the top to say, for the purposes of this chapter, a dwelling unit or temporary structure, properly permitted temporary structure can be used for a short.
And we can add that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just didn't see it anywhere in there.
Far more eloquent than what I just.
Yeah,
tried
I
to
don't
do
know
for
that I
5 minutes ago.
specified that, so.
Oh, is that what you were trying to
That was
do?
exactly what I was trying to accomplish.
Oh, I couldn't understand what you were saying.
I get it. Yes, no, that was exactly. Kudos to you.
But what other issues did you have with option 2? Because that was the one I was leaning towards.
I looked at both. Although I think I would be noting on one of them.
And when we had the discussion a month ago, the dwelling unit with the 7 different nuances, someone asked me to add that too, because that opened up a little more flexibility to what would be considered as a dwelling if it had these items.
Right, so if
So
you,
that's why that's in there.
I guess I would say my point is if we're going option 2, that's fine, but I would I would like to get the wordage that tents, teepees, tree houses are allowed at least when we send it out for public comment. We can change that when it comes back, but I want to make it crystal clear when it goes out to public comment that we're thinking of allowing those. And with that either option, I don't really care which one. I saw a note that you wanted, had to include the definition or the good neighbor guide and a burn ban notice. Going back to my signage thing, I didn't see that in there that you must have a whatever 24-inch burn ban sign on your property. I read that and I think as long as they have a piece of paper like this in their handbook, they're covered.
Right.
And not literally a sign
And
out.
I would say we can certainly add that.
Right, so I saw that, I didn't see that, which is why I
Right,
bring it up. I had curiosities of smoke detectors and whatever. In the ordinance, if you were gonna allow a temporary structure as a tent or a yurt, how do you comply with the smoke detector?
You have a battery operated one,
Type stuff.
right?
Um,
But sleeping areas by my code have to have a smoke detector.
no matter what.
And
You gotta have a battery operated smoke detector in a tent? Not
no, but
this,
to be approved as a sleeping room, yes, the building code says that.
Okay,
To cover for safety's sake, you know,
so on the short-term rental and your definitions, you may want to add in there, a temporary structure as well as a tiny house or park model trailer or whatever. Because you have it above and below, but a short-term rental isn't included in what's allowed.
on option 1 or option 2.
Option 2, the actual definitions, short-term rental.
Okay, it says a short-term rental shall be a properly permitted structure or a properly labeled factory assembled structure, which would be tiny homes that aren't manufactured homes.
But your temporary structure, does that automatically fit under a temporary? It's just not clear.
Right,
You know what I'm
right.
saying?
Well, and that's kind of where I was going. I mean, I'm reading this thinking it's not allowed, and now you're telling me it kind of is. I think the person who's reading this is gonna read some of this stuff and go, nah, my thing doesn't qualify, when we might be trying to make it qualify.
Right, so that's where you were
That's where I
saying at
was
the very
trying to just
beginning,
literally
to say it can be a dwelling unit or a temporary
vote on
structure.
each individual item, so it's crystal clear and not,
But if we have that,
If it's in the definitions and that's what it says.
well, it wouldn't necessarily need to be in the definitions, it would be as the whereas part, that it can be a dwelling unit or a temporary structure, and then you define what those are in the definitions. Somehow work in that verbiage.
No, sending it back to staff. to
Right,
figure it
right.
out. You know the direction.
And so which option is the preferred option before we give it to the PA so that the PA doesn't have to read 2 versions?
Which one did you like more, Dave?
Or do I give both to his office and
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't really, I'm fine.
they're very similar?
They're similar. I see big problems with implementation as far as with the really broad definition of what, like, I don't have any issue with short-term rentals being, basically dwellings. I don't see any issues with that, whether, if you want to do that. If you want to do short-term rentals that are basically for habitation, people are sleeping in them, they're camping is, we have campgrounds and we have definitions of campgrounds. We have RV parks, we have definitions of RV parks. Short-term rentals to me is what I think of when I do personally short-term rentals. I'm renting a house or a part of a house, If I'm staying in a campground, I'm camping in a campground, or I'm in an RV park. So I'm not okay. I'm gonna be a hard no on that part of the definition. And that's just my personal, that's 1/3. And so, but I'm not opposed to, I think you should, if you are seriously considering that's gonna include teepees and tents and chicken houses and whatever,
But you're gonna have to
then
pick
you're gonna have to
one.
go out there, you're gonna have to pick one.
Mhm.
The public should know that is what we're thinking about doing, and then they can comment on that.
But
So,
you're gonna only get one, because if you have more than one, now it's a campground.
Right.
And
what I
then
said,
that's
it's not
gonna
a
be a
campground.
CUP.
It's not an RV site because it's only one. Right. And you're sleeping in it, which makes it a dwelling unit.
yeah, I
I don't know.
no, and I said that's just my opinion.
I just want to clarify, does the board consider short-term rental a form of land use?
Yeah, this board member does, and I honestly, this is,
And so even though I appreciate the intent and everything, but with the current ordinance, I'm just going to give a party pressure because nothing in the code would allow for short-term rental outright without a CUP. I knew I came back and talked to you all about maybe one house would be okay. But I reviewed the zoning ordinance again, and that's not something that is built into our code, would allow me to sign off on anything. If something is not saying that is a prohibited use, and it's not a permitted use, then they will need to go through a CUP process.
Right.
I know for a fact that if the property has an ADU on the property, approved ADU, that is the prohibition, so it's a no for sure. But everywhere else would require a CUP. I just want to,
So every person, just for clarification from what I think I just heard, every short-term rental permit application is gonna have to go through the CUP process because of the way our ordinance is already written.
right, so until we change our
Until we can
code.
change that, right?
So if you want to have a separate title and that's not considered as a land use, you want to process it as if this is a license versus a permit, then maybe the prosecutor could, look at that maybe, but if you are treating this as a form of land use, it involves planning department. And until the code change, I'm sorry, I can't sign off on it.
Well, we're practically created a license for the recreational, the RVs in essence. I would see this as a license more than a permit in terms of, I guess I've always used license and permit interchangeably in a lot of ways, in which I should probably be.
yeah, maybe not.
Confident.
Yeah.
In the
But
way
see, I don't
use it.
feel I can issue a license. I can issue a permit, but I can't issue a license. It's not in my verbiage of my codes. I don't issue a building permit, or a building license, I issue a building permit. So I wouldn't be comfortable issuing licenses.
But you issue permits through your, I would call this more of a building permit than a land use permit.
But I can't issue a building permit if Mochi can't sign off on the land use. Just the same as if David can't sign off on the water and septic, or he can't sign off on the road. I can't issue a permit unless all 4 departments agree. I'm the last leg, and if they tell me no, I say no, I can't issue a permit if they don't have what they need. We never have, and
So how Skamania did it is they went through and had all the meetings and they changed their land use code while creating the short-term rental ordinance itself. The short-term rental ordinance has its own chapter, and then they amended the land use code to allow for it because they stole our ADU ordinance when they built theirs, and then they amended that ordinance to allow for it. And then when they did that, they allowed it everywhere within.
And that was my interpretation of essentially what we were going to do, because hopefully if we reopened land use and had this in there, then we could also fix the ADU part to be able to allow one of the units in this as well.
Right, and I think that's exactly, but I
But
think that's what
so
she's saying, is you
you
can, but
can't
you,
touch it until you're done doing that.
Exactly. She
And I
can't-
understand that.
Yeah,
I
if I
just-
give her something, she's gonna say no until hers.
right,
is-
because it's inconsistent with our adopted
Right.
zoning.
Unless you
And
call
I-
it, unless you call it a cottage industry, like some counties do.
But it's the same thing for me. For me to say it's a sleeping room, I have to say it has to have a carbon monoxide alarm.
But I
I can't
think
let you
this
sleep
can,
there if it doesn't.
this can be worked on. It can go out to the public. We can have hearings on it. And we can also open up that code to fix the other things that need fixed in that at the same time. And
I guess-
it takes 6 months or 9 months.
I guess the decision is do we want to get this through the process and adopted and then go back and change the zoning code for maybe this and other things?
That was my
Because
thinking,
when we
because that
go-
gives zoning people that are sitting on that board a draft of what we're trying to accomplish.
But if we implement this, we're not gonna be able to utilize it fully
Yeah, until-
Not
because,
until,
right,
but at least we have title codes sitting there that we know that that's the direction that the board is given. And then when we go through the planning process, planning commission, SEPA process, we know what you're getting when you come out the other end.
We're not having them invent the wheel, we just did it. That's my thinking of it.
so,
You think doing it together all at the same time makes more sense?
Like, other than it's a
Then it would be a
lot,
lot.
but it is how Skamania did it, because they recognized if they passed something that was unimplementable, they needed to, plus the two, I do see the reason of that, they go together, because if there's a problem either way, you kind of fix it as you go, as far as you make the.
How big and how long of a process and how many tweaks do you guys see needing made to our zoning when that gets reopened by the planning department for things like this?
Well, first off, I would say the entire, which that's a much bigger conversation. Our comp plan and our sub-area plans are woefully inadequate and out of date, and we have piecemeal updated them for the last 30 years, probably, at least. The comp plan is literally typed, I think it was mimeographed. It's the original.
Carbon copy?
It is, I think it's the original, like, we've had one code.
So
It's
that's
like
gonna
when we
be a-
went from no code to the state said, you must have comprehensive planning, do it. And they probably cranked it out, in a week and
How
adopted
in depth
it.
of a process, how long? do you
Oh,
think
God,
that's all gonna
it's
take?
god awful, it's terrible. It's years, costs lots of money. We're eventually gonna have to do it, or,
so do we?
I'm not
do
saying
this
we
or do
hold
wait?
any of that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying,
And do I give this to the PA yet? Do we need to tweak it a little more? I don't want to waste his time because,
So I personally would like to get this code on the books. And we know that we have issues over here, but at least then when the complaints come in, we can say, look, we have a code sitting there. We're just working through that next process to get it there.
We can't issue you a permit yet, but we're also
But-
not accepting that complaint.
But we don't have a liaison officer anyway, so it's okay. But, and then with Mochi, that could be a 6-month process in order to amend a few words in there that says in every zone, except for this zone, short-term rentals, short-term rentals according to title, this is allowed. Right?
I don't know, because there's a SEPA process, even if you are working on this code. And, granted planning is not a lead, but I believe anytime when you establish a new ordinance, it may subject to SEPA. So that might be something that you also want to consider. And then when we make changes to our zoning code, depending if this is a procedural change, just to clarify things, or you're making a substantial change, that in itself will trigger SEPA, and who knows what is the SEPA
All right,
outcome of that is going to be. So
because I guarantee you, if it triggers SEPA, the anti-development folks are going to say you must consider, on a programmatic across the county, what are the impacts, what are the environmental impacts of you implementing this new short-term rental policy, and that you're gonna have to do analysis as far as, what the potential, some reasonable, to be able to provide that information to the folks that, us, the decision makers on, is this a good idea or not? Is it, what are the impacts on water and all these different, you know how this goes. And there's a reason,
There's a reason that hasn't been updated in 35 years.
there's.
I get it,
Right.
But here's the question, the $30,000 question.
Yeah. Well, if it was only
Does it
$30,000.
need to be updated? If it does,
Terribly.
we have to do it, regardless of the mess it's gonna create. That's my thing. You kicking it down the road, it's just gonna get worse. I think it'll get any better.
So I guess personally, I wouldn't have a problem sending this option 2 with the changes to the prosecutor to have him take a look at it. I would also look into to see if the cottage industries definition works, so that we don't have to go in and change the planning code in essence.
How would I go about that? Because I don't know how I would look at a cottage industry code or anything.
It's part of the zoning. Or, in essence, you're not changing anything on the property, whether you're staying there or somebody else is staying there, the same somebody's staying there. And so I don't know, Skamania got through it, so maybe what we do is we talk to those guys over there.
Right, zoning and that sort of thing.
Well, generally, like cottage industry, just as a general rule, it's just in some ways as a way of saying something that's really small scale. It's considered like if I want to have a bed and breakfast and it's under 2 bedrooms, it's not actually, it's a bed and breakfast, but it's not if it's 2 or less. And I'm talking about scenic area zoning right now. It's not, it's a cottage industry, so it's not really that. If it's more than that, it gets the full blown, and it's actually not allowed, and not allowed. And then that's pretty much how they do that with a lot of things. If it's minor, and it's not dissimilar. I mean, there's stuff in here about the RCW on the short-term rental. If it's 3 rooms or less, shall not be considered. It's kind of saying it's in a different category because it's small potatoes. It's not. You're not running a hotel. You're running a cottage industry. So I don't know if that's
maybe,
kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, so maybe the RCWs covers us so that we don't have to go through the.
I don't know. I would be curious.
Or do we say that we recognize, for now, we say we recognize there's this RCW on the books, and so we're not going to accept any complaints, but we're not going to process.
Are we
them
getting
either.
complaints about short-term rentals?
Kind of 4 or 5
Okay.
So far.
so far, but we get a lot of people who want to do it.
Right.
A lot of people who are doing it, but
I just know there will be lots of interest in this discussion. Then when we get into the, are we gonna open up the ADU and include that? That's another can of worms too. And I'm not saying you don't do it. I'm just saying have your eyes open.
That's why I'd like to get through this first before we go do that.
Yeah, I'm fine with sending it to the PA. for
version
review.
1 or version
2, I'm fine with 2. As far as Skamania counties was as close to I could live with it as I could get.
And are we not including temporary structures? Is that our
You
comfort level?
can include, it's my folks can.
I want to include it.
I wanted it included.
Okay.
When people are already doing it, I'd like to see it.
But my
Go ahead.
comfort level is going to be then I have to cover my conscience of saying you have to have a smoke detector somehow.
That's fine.
I mean, I don't care if it's battery operated, but
That's fine.
you know.
As long as Gordy doesn't want a 20-foot driveway approach to their tent, we'll be fine.
I mean,
We might.
No, go ahead. No,
Okay.
that's,
Hey, you gotta, I have to
you,
use
it's, the
government,
2 of them
so-
want it. I'm not gonna be a hard no on it, but that's okay. Send it off. I'm curious what the, because I
We
think there'll
didn't-
be some tweaking going
We
on.
didn't
right?
officially vote to
No, I'm not officially doing a
Well,
hard
that's what
no.
I'm
Right,
saying.
right.
We're only positive now, looking for public comment. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna change my mind based off public comment. I'm just saying it needs.
No,
to
we've
be
sent things to
included in
public comment that I knew I was gonna be a
So
no.
I'll prepare these to send to the
I
PD's
know,
office
right.
for review. When we get something back, then I can schedule another workshop with Lee.
Now you make me think. Yes, now you're making me think. There has to have been some time. Maybe
All right.
not.
Is that
Maybe it
it?
got modified around enough that by the time it was okay.
Look at that,
Anything
dead
else?
on time, 3:00.
No, so that's
We're not
Mochi's
done
turn.
yet, because I want to bring up the whole comp plan back to that, because my interpretation was we were doing this first, knowing we would have to modify that, and now you're looking for ways around modifying that. I want to know, does the board have an interest in opening that back up and fixing those issues, or is that something that we don't want to even, you don't want me to bring that up for the rest of the year? I don't want to keep hounding on
No,
something.
no,
that's getting shot
I would
down,
say
so-
my perspective is regardless of short-term rental, RVs, any of that stuff, the comp plan, even without even thinking about that stuff, is woefully out of date, and it should have been updated years ago. And we're going to have to do it, but it will be a multi-year, god-awful.
That's my point. So should we, because I want to do it, not that I'm excited to
think
do
you
it,
want to do it.
but I think it's, no, I
But that's
don't.
not me,
Listen,
so
No, that's,
I
don't
can leave the
want to do
table.
it.
I have scar tissue from the
No.
last.
So my point is, I don't.
Yeah,
wanna
you can
have-
leave, get run while
Yeah.
you're
off.
I don't do comp
Sit
plans
in that chair,
either.
young lady.
That's a planning issue.
So my, right,
Yes,
so my
right.
point is I don't want to bring this up constantly like a
No.
moratorium or something and keep getting shot down. I would like guidance from my seatmates on whether we're actually going to get something like this handled. And if we are, when are we going to start?
Would you like to sit down?
Yes, I can talk when I stand up too, so.
I
Yeah,
might need a pee break before we continue, but
we can do that.
I'll give you time for your blood pressure to calm down.
Oh, are you kidding?
Kneel to this.
Oh. Jeez. This is nothing.
I have a quick question for the board, real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if Lynn has stepped out yet.
Here,
Okay.
We can't talk about her, so
Yeah.
we can have her
Are
leave.
we applying the building code to those temporary structures?
Only,
If we want to.
yeah,
So only if you want to make them not work.
the only way I
This is my
cannot
problem with
apply the building code is if they meet the criteria for a temporary structure, which is the less than 500 square feet, not heated. If they're heated, if they're bigger than 500 square feet,
You
any
would
of
apply
those
the building
things,
code.
then now they're not temporary and they don't meet that criteria anymore, so now I have to apply building code.
So if I've got a little teepee in my yard and I don't have a heater in it, Mr. Kavanaugh doesn't get to tell me what water I drink or where I defecate. is what
Right,
you're
but
saying.
if you put in an 800 square foot yurt, now it's a building permit and everything applies.
800 square feet.
Well,
awfully
hold up.
big.
Okay,
Only drinking water applies to the building code. Where you defecate applies everywhere in the county.
right.
Good
That's
point.
a local rule.
Good point. So you're always getting told that.
Mr. Kavanaugh likes to correct me and I thank you for that.
Anything else, Dave?
Anything else for me, Mr.
Nope.
Kavanaugh?
No, not right this
I'm gonna-
second, apparently. All right.
Oh, I'm heading back to the vaccine clinic, so I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
So when we talk about comprehensive plan update, I want to make sure we also talk about some area plans.
Yes.
Because it's a component of that. And just a real quick planning 101. So I know it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be difficult.
I said god awful. That's right.
You describe it way better than I can. But that is something that we really should do
We should.
because this is really is the guidance document. Dominion County went through their comprehensive plan process recently. They had appeals and they went through it. And that's why they were able to do a lot of the zoning code amendment
How long did it take them to get through it? Was it, I mean, did they?
years.
Okay.
Because they did have multiple, appeals and zoning code issues.
Oh, but we won't.
Of course not, 'cause I'm
Everybody
here.
loves us. Come on.
And so, just keep that in mind. I cannot give you a timeline, but I'm willing to get the process started, by starting talking to the sub areas, the council. How can, the group represent the community councils,
Community council.
because they always have great interest in doing those and start from there. But it's going to cost resources. I might need some assistance.
Not mine,
consultants.
Gordy. Just be.
Right.
No. Yeah, what?
She needs resources, so I would.
Not you might.
I was delegating.
Come on.
If I'm not in charge, then I don't.
I know. It's like, let's.
So I always.
Might.
I don't
That's like
say
me saying,
anything.
oh, it might. No, you will need resources. You cannot, there is no way with your current,
And just so you know, we have two pending updates that we have to do, which is the shoreline master plan update and also the critical areas update, which is ongoing. And speaking of that, I'm going to bring a contract back for our consultant for the critical areas update and the SMP update back to you, just so that we're not asking for more money because the money is already there. But we just need to update some of the terms, about how to allocate those funds, as well as to put an end date on the contract, which will be the end of this year. And then if we have to renew it, I'll bring it back. With that being said, and the upcoming discussions that we're supposed to have, I cannot give you a timeline when or how that's going to happen, but I'm with your direction.
moving.
I will try.
That's
to
all
get
I
something
asked from
going.
them is to know whether we're actually moving now or if we're waiting now and moving later. I would prefer to start now, but I think she needs somebody else to say that too.
Planning is my dirty habit, thing I love. We need, so the sub area plans is god awful to update every one of them, because you're looking down in there and it puts one neighbor against another neighbor. The overall comprehensive plan that's talking about goals, directions, where we want to move, that's a little easier.
It is a little easier, maybe,
We hope.
might be.
Yeah, it would be a hope.
That's a mochi might.
But we do, and I don't know if we're going to do something like that, Mochi needs help. I don't know if the best way to help is to hire an outside consulting firm to come in to work on that, or to maybe bring on a staff person to work on the comprehensive plan update and have that be their job. I went back and talked to some of the old timers about how they successfully did it the first time. And they're like, oh no, there's no difference. There was appeals the first time. It was a lot easier to get through appeals back then, but there were always appeals. There was a lot of people who didn't want to have planning at all back then. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
you were seeing both sides of that spectrum. But the main thing that they said that they had success with is that when the community councils were drawing it up, the planning director or one of the designees were there telling these local groups, this is what you can and this is what you can't do, because everybody wanted to go do things that, sorry, we're not going there. And so I would see it as a staff person that would work through that. Just this last week, the Trout Lake Community Council brought it up and saying, hey guys, we turned in our comprehensive plan update in 2010 and it's still sitting there. We're due for our 10-year update. You just never adopted it in the first place. And they want to talk about it. So that's sub-area plan. Overall comprehensive plan. I like keeping sub-area plans separate, but there's also something to be said if you just do the whole bloody thing all at once and deal with all the appeals all at once, then rather than having $400,000 on each sub-area plan and appeals fees, you're looking at this from a much bigger perspective, and you'll pay the $400,000 and get it through in the end.
Yeah, I mean, you know where I'm at on this. We need to do it. It's, staff versus consultant, I would be fine with, I would rather have an in-house person if you can find somebody that they're good and they have the level of competency. Because it takes a special person. I completely agree with Commissioner Anderson about I think the downfalls we've had when we've done sub-area plan updates. I think community councils are a great resource to use, but the problem we've had, we've had a few that have basically done their sub-area updates with no real interaction with the planning department, no guidance, no mentoring, and they ended up with sub-area plans that had parts of them that were basically illegal, that we couldn't do, that they were also counter to the overall planning policy of the county. And so then they come to the planning commission. The planning commission's like, oh God, no, we can't do this. We're not going to do this. We're not going to recommend that. Then it sets up this fight. They start fighting because, I've said before, that's like they've worked and worked on it. It's their baby. They take it to the planning commission. They said, that's the ugliest baby I've ever seen. And the fight's on. And then we end up we're the final. And then when we were like, good Lord, we got to choose sides in this. And then we get sued because the original people that wrote it now file an appeal on it because we didn't implement all 427 things that they wanted in there. And so the solution is, at the beginning, this is what we're going to do. We're here to guide you. We want your input as far as the communities, but this product, you're going to end up with a product that's legal and it's consistent with the county's overall planning goals. And then as long as they know that at the beginning, the fight's at the beginning. So what are your chances between consultant or, I understand consultants are nice because they're like, you're not really managing them. Although I know you have to manage consultants, but they also they're not really as engaged because they're not here in the department.
So
They're
I've
remotely.
been thinking about comprehensive plan and sub-area plan updates for a while. But I'm just kind
In
of.
your spare time.
Just waiting for us to give her
And I just
permission is what she's doing.
waiting to see, the direction from the board. So now that I have the direction, if you would allow me some time to think this through, and then I'll bring it back and maybe schedule another workshop to talk about, planning department update. And then I can kind of give you a better picture rather than kind of just off the cuff to tell you one way or the other, if that's okay.
No, my thinking on whether in-house or consultant is whatever your professional opinion thinks would be better, because
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I will bring that.
I'm just excited to get it done.
No, not
You
to
ain't
get
gonna
it
be
done.
moving
You're
that
not going to
fast.
be when
Get
it's
it started. Well, it might be done by
the
the time I leave office.
For a long time.
Yeah. In my lifetime. Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute recess for.
Blood pressure medication. We'll be
No,
right back.
I was like, you asked for a break.
Back at 3.
I did
Yeah, no,
announce
yes.
10 minutes ago, I already went.
Never mind.
Get,
Yes.
You have 23 participants.
there's 5 or 6 of those that are you and staff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will call us back from our recess. We will continue. So we've got on the schedule, we're going to continue our discussions on solar energy, solar siding, which I think is good. This is really our first real opportunity since our post. We took the tour out to Prineville as a board, and we haven't really had a chance to debrief and be able to have a discussion in an open session. So, as opposed to not having discussions not in an open session, I want to be clear about
I was going to clarify. for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. It's like, hey, wait a minute. No, we haven't had any discussion. So, where do we want to start?
Well, is the policy direction again, which way the board wants to go. And And I just want to let you know that the two developers who hosted the tour, they provided some follow-up information to me, but it's not completed yet. And so I'm kind of holding on to send the packet to the board and to all the, interested parties or the folks who attended the tour. Because there were some questions asked during the tour. At that time, they were not able to provide responses. So they are trying to get back to me on those. And I'm hoping that maybe by next week, I will have those that I can share with everybody.
So you're gonna share those with all the people that came for the tour? They don't have to actually,
I have that email address, and so
Okay.
I will share, because those questions were raised during the tour.
right, I was
Yeah.
asking that more for clarification to them, that they don't have to go file a request for it, because
Oh,
we're
no.
gonna give it to them
No,
without a request.
lots of time we provide
Yeah.
response without request. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, other feedback either from the tour or just in general about, obviously, things are happening.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, why don't you start it off?
I get to, usually the chair doesn't go first, but I guess I
The
would.
chair points at me and lets me get everybody riled up.
Oh, that's fine. I guess I'd start with the tour. I thought the tour was informative, particularly the second one, I would say. I would say the one in the morning was good as far as for folks to visually be able to see what it was like to, what a project might look like, or this one looks like. The project was pretty much wound down as far as the construction. There wasn't a lot of folks on site to answer any really technical questions beyond just the construction versus the operations. I thought the afternoon one, I was very appreciative of. Is that I don't know which was
The
which.
afternoon was
Avangrid.
Avangrid.
Avangrid, where they did have the kind of system experts in all the different disciplines as far as.
Was it Cypress Creek at that one too?
They were part of, yes.
Yeah.
They had somebody there, right? But they had, so I thought that was really helpful to be able to, if you could ask a question, they could answer a question. They had a few that apparently they weren't able to, that they wanted to follow up on. So I would say, as far as that part, I thought that was really useful as far as just getting some background information as we talk about it. I would say for me, I have, and this is not just over the last week or two, it's actually the last couple of months. I was thinking, I think one thing I need to make clear as far as with my seatmates and folks listening, that the county has an adopted policy in regards to industrial scale solar development. It was not really, with the development of the energy overlay zone, big industrial solar was not necessarily considered as far as it was definitely part of the overlay zone, but we were really focused on wind. And I've said that before, there's nothing earth shaking about that. And that issue's been raised before about, the overlay zone, you weren't thinking about solar, which is, I don't know that that's relevant, but what is relevant, at least to me, is that we did go through a pretty extensive public process when we updated the strategic economic plan, which we adopted, I think, in 2017. We actually started on that. We worked on that. It was over a year, I want to say. We spent a considerable amount of resource, over $100,000, if I'm remembering correctly, in consulting fees as far as in facilitation. And we did spend hundreds of hours of folks and a lot of people as far as different stakeholders across the county when we were coming up with the clusters that we were going to focus on. So there was a lot of thought given to what kind of businesses we wanted to promote or not promote, and the recommendation, which we eventually adopted. Ultimately, the board adopted it, but it was I believe unanimous from the Economic Development Authority, was clean energy, green energy, solar, industrial scale solar was, I think it's important to say, just so that I'm crystal clear, so that later when I'm talking, you remember this, that the industrial scale solar is not just to be tolerated in Klickitat County, it's actually to be encouraged in Klickitat County. That is the policy of the county. That's not that doesn't have to be my personal policy. It's the policy of the county, and I'm implementing that policy. Now, that said, that does not mean that the hows and wheres is not, the if is not in question to me, and I'm not interested in having opening up the question of if we should have industrial solar in the county. I think from my perspective, that question's been answered through a public process, and it's yes, we want it in. Now, as to where it goes and how it goes, I think I'm open to, I think, seeing it, going out, touring things, and seeing these facilities, I do have some questions. And I think I would not be opposed to, particularly around, most of my questions center around the Knight Road substation and projects that are going to tie to that. I have fewer questions out east. I don't think it's a big of an issue, but I do have some questions that I think we need some answers to as we decide, as far as scale and scope of projects. We don't currently have any projects under permit in that area. We all have heard, I know people are listening and watching right now. We certainly have heard that there, we've had some preliminary stuff going out there, but I'm actually in favor of us taking a pause. I don't like to use the word moratorium because that's I don't like that word. I'll leave it to staff. And again, this is just me putting this out there, and my seatmates we can talk about this. But some kind of pause on projects that are going to tie to that Knight area substation while we work out some of the issues as far as density, the size, not necessarily the size of the individual projects, and then how the setbacks. Because we've done a resolution now, which I voted yes, I supported, as far as that anything that goes to that would go through a conditional use permit, which I think is good for a public process. But one of the issues that does raise is it does eliminate the mandatory minimum and maximum setbacks that are in the energy overlay zone. That concerns me a little bit. That's one of those things. Maybe that's perfectly good. I don't know. It's actually, I'll shut up now at this point. I'd love to hear from folks because it just proves, I'm sure I've shocked my seatmates because we don't talk about this stuff because we can't.
I wouldn't say you shocked me. I kind of expected it coming, so it wasn't necessarily a shock. I had hoped that it would come sooner rather than later, and I don't necessarily understand what your pause means. So further enlightenment on that would be good, but my opinion from day one has always been that I believe, my personal opinion, yes, the county has a pro-solar policy, and I'm fully aware that 99.9% of the people in Bickleton want solar over there, and I'm happy to give it to them. But I also believe that I don't believe most of the people around Goldendale even knew solar was an option until it fell from the sky and landed on their head. I don't think our county has always been super transparent with things like that or potential of things like that, which I personally hope to change. And you've known from the start that I believe our ordinances are severely lacking, and I would like to look at setbacks and ordinances and make up what we as a board, and I might be outvoted on that, and that's fine. I'm not gonna throw a fit if you guys say, you know, X for this and I want Y. That's what the board voted. I'm not, I'm done. I won't argue it. I just think we should be the one to set things like setbacks in our policy as opposed to letting her guess what we want. So yes, I want some kind of ordinances type of a situation set up, and I'm happy to see it sounds like we might be moving that direction.
Before if you'll defer for a second. I'm not necessarily saying, I think because, you know, we're having a candid conversation. When people, you know, we went over to Crook County, we've heard about how, you know, it's, you know, we got the Crook County ordinance. I did read through that. It's a fine solar ordinance. I don't have any issues with it. My point of view is that when I look at that ordinance, we're actually doing all the things that they're doing in Crook County. It's already in, or it's just not laid out in that way specifically. And that's what that's one of the things that maybe we want to talk about. So I just want to be clear. I'm not saying we don't have an ordinance now, or that we do, but I think it is very confusing, and it's not clear to folks, stakeholders, that these, like, honestly, the stuff about environmental protection, we have ever been as much environmental protection in our ordinance, possibly more than they do in Oregon in the Crook County ordinance. Ours are actually more in depth. There is more, but you don't get that from reading the overlay zone or our ordinances. And I think part of the problem is a misunderstanding about that. And I think that needs to be clarified. So it makes it, you know, maybe we do need to pull those out and have them in a standalone, you know, solar, I don't know that I call it ordinance, maybe it's the policy as far as
policy or something.
Something like that, I don't
know
know.
with anything in our environmental either, because I think ours are bigger than theirs. And my personal opinion is this will go through a full CEPA and all that will be fleshed out in the process. My issue is, you know, 6-foot fences with razor wire or 7-foot fences without razor wire. Are there fences going down both sides of Knight Road, starting at the property line for 3 miles and it looks like we live in a prison, or are they set back 1,000 feet? Are we set back 200 feet from a property line, but 500 feet from a resident's property line? Those are the things I want to address, and I want to put in an ordinance / policy / rule / whatever you want to call it. That's where I want to go. Long term, I would like to have a future discussion on more solar. I want to relook at whether, because I don't know that this is going to be the end all, and we don't end up with another something like this happening in downtown Centerville. And when you guys did everything in 2017, I can tell you a lot of people had no idea. They were 100% pro windmill, never thought solar was coming, and those 100% people are no longer 100% people. So there's going to be a long-term discussion when this one's finished, but.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Your turn.
I thought that I've always said that I wanted to go and learn and see first. And I want to say to all of the people that are on this phone call, I am sorry that you have lost sleep. I am sorry that you have upended your life, and every moment that you spend out holding a picket or a sign is a moment that you're not enjoying your life. I am sorry that that is the case, and that solar is coming to this county, and that we all have to deal with it. Solar is an interesting situation because no matter what we decide here, they can go do an end around us, and they can go through the FSEC process. My personal belief, and the reason that I voted no on the moratorium, is that I see the FSEC process as the worst outcome for the citizens of Klickitat County. Straight up. That does not allow Mochi to be the SEPA official. That does not allow us to be in the position where we can negotiate for the best outcomes for our citizens. And everything that I see out of the state government, whether it be the governor or the commissioner of public lands, is that we are doing solar and we're going to lease our property and we're going to break leases in order to do it. With all that being said, this is a very sticky issue, because if we do so much that we push the companies that currently have leases through the FSEC process, I consider that an automatic loss from this commission. And I want to stop that from happening. The negotiations between neighbors, between fences, between all of that, through the conditional use permit process, that will happen. I guarantee it. If we say moratorium or pause or anything else, all that does is tell every one of these companies, you're going through FSEC. There are currently projects in Washington State going through the FSEC process. In Benton County, in Klickitat, or in Yakima County, the Horse Heaven process. I call that a loss to this county. What I want to see is I want to see it go through our process so that we can ensure that we have the best outcome for our citizens. And in order to do that, we have already made sure that anything with Knight Road, which is what we know about, is going to go through the conditional use permit process. I stated on Tuesday that I thought that I understood from a previous meeting that Mochi said that they will be required to do a full EIS. And I wanted to double check with Mochi. I haven't watched the video. If somebody proposes something on Knight Road, would you require them to go through a full EIS?
Most likely, I would really do not want to predetermine the decision, but just looking at, what we had so far in the county for the Glen Hill Solar,
Right.
and the majority of the wind projects, either the county require them to go through an EIS or the developers already volunteer to go through the EIS process. So the chances are for Knight project, most likely will go through a EIS process. But again, I want to stress is planning department is trying to be as transparent as possible. On the other hand, I do not want to provide information that is just in a draft format,
right,
or is not the final version of the layout to the public, because what it does is just miscommunicate, put misinformation out there. That's the last thing that we want to do. So until I have a project application, then I can formally issue a determination for SEPA. But to answer your questions, most likely, yes.
Okay, so it is a most likely. And that gives me a heck of a lot more ability to sleep at night. The fact that it will go through a full process, and that has a public process. The conditional use permit has a public process. And then there's the appeals process and everything else. I would much rather see somebody apply for and go through our current process through the conditional use than FSEC. With that being said, I am not against to help every one of these people on this phone call sleep at night. I am not against working to draft up ordinances that are the base minimums of what these companies will do. And then if the neighboring landowners want to try to negotiate with these companies so that there's benefit on both sides, I see a lot of options for things like that. But if we simply say the setback is 1,000 feet, well, that one of these neighbors may have been like, well, I didn't mind if it was only 500 feet. Heck, I wouldn't have minded if it came onto my property a little bit. But there's room for negotiation, and that's how everything gets done now. And I want to ensure that stays there. And the conditional use permit process is one process I see for doing that. But also, that being said, though, is any ordinance that we do create, I would like that to be its own separate ordinance or policy and not clump it in with the energy overlay zone. And the reason for that is that a portion of this project is outside the energy overlay zone. And it is solar, it's its own thing. Whether those policies are just policies, which we can do, then it doesn't have to go through an EIS. I don't want to have to go through a full EIS for solar for us, just to adopt policies.
When I made my motion for moratorium the first week, it wasn't to stop anything or to scare people into the state process. My hope was that we could do some research and come down with some ordinances that are separate and not added into the EOZ, just like we're thinking now. So, and then be done with it and moratorium over, so that we can move on with life. So now, this late in the game, I think, yeah, if you closed it down, you're scaring them off to the FSEC process. So I don't know what you're meaning by pause, but I think it's more like, I would
No, I
say
mean, it's
no
a-
pause, no moratorium. Let's just get to work on some ordinances, whatever. You know, the word minimum, I'm more of a maximum, but whatever I can get is better than nothing. I worry when I hear negotiations with the energy companies and the landowners, because I personally don't see one incentive at all for the energy company to negotiate with the landowner that lives next door. What does he have to gain? Nothing. He's got everything to lose, and that's setback, bitching, arguing, name calling. The way it is, he can build it on the fence line, so might as well just build it on the fence line. I don't see the energy company giving just for the love of being neighborly, because they're going to build it and move out of town. So I don't think the energy company is going to be neighborly unless we make them be neighborly. I don't want to leave it on our citizens to negotiate with the energy company on if they get a setback. That's our job to protect them, not their job to argue with it or fight a multi-billion-dollar corporation to try to get a setback.
I think you misunderstood that. I was going the opposite way. If your setback's at 500 feet, you can negotiate closer. And that means the energy company is going to be giving you something.
I agree with
to
that.
get closer.
But-
Not negotiating the other way. You don't negotiate against yourself.
Right, but they don't even have 500 feet right now. So the property owners, let's say the people on Fish Hatchery Road, they have nothing to negotiate with. Because right now that can be right on the fence line. If we gave them 500 feet or 1,000 feet, they have something to negotiate with. Yes, but right now they have nothing to negotiate with.
So let me just kind of, so first of all, when we did the energy overlay zone programmatic EIS, it's not project specific. The goal was to establish the zoning overlay, the EOZ, so that we can have a permitting process, a streamlined permitting process established. Solar was mentioned, but maybe not to the scale of the industrial size solar that we are seeing right now. But the outcome of that programmatic EIS does created the energy overlay zone, which wind turbines and solar are permitted outright. So that's the regulations. He didn't talk about the size for solar or anything like that. So now what we have is energy overlay zone, that solar is permitted outright, that they can go through that process as a regulations. But within the regulation itself, we also have site-specific requirements. They have to go through a CEPA process for their project level, application. And that's how Lund Hill got approved, because they are all within the energy overlay zone. And we went through a EIS, identify issues, and they meet all those requirements. And that's how we get that done. Now, if for night project, first of all, Washington and Oregon land use is very different.
Yeah.
One is bottom up, bottom down. The other one is, like top down, bottom up. So Oregon doesn't have a CEPA process. Washington has a CEPA process. We can, put a pause on this solar development for any project connected to night substation. But this pause, the only way that I can do that through the planning process is a moratorium, like interim zoning ordinance. You can put it for 6 months or less and we need to have a public hearing hosted by the board within 60 days. There's really no guarantee for the outcome for this pause. The only guarantee is if any developer submit an application to the county, I cannot process it because we have a moratorium in place. With that said, we don't have performance standard spelled out clearly in our zoning code. But that's not just for solar. If you want to come in to do a mini storage, I don't have performance standard that I put on. Not for daycare, for a lot of land use that's common today, but it wasn't back then. So we rely on the CUP process and the CEPA process to identify what is the appropriate mitigations or conditions to attach to the permit. So a lot of things that we see in Crow County ordinances, we have that built in through our CEPA process. They talk about decommissioning plan. We have decommissioning plan requirement. But the form of financial security, we might need to update to reflect what's the proper form that we use, but that is something that we have. It's not like we don't have anything. They talk about the emergency management plan. We have that, or if it's not detailed enough, through the site-specific CEPA process, we can make that become a condition of approval. They have to provide that to the county before we will sign up on any building permit. So perhaps, if we end up putting a pause on this, what planning department need to do is not necessarily create a new ordinance, but rather is to document the policy that what items that I need to look at, I meaning the planning department, when we actually have a site-specific project submitted to me. It's because most residents have concern that we have nothing to rely upon. I would disagree with that because, we try to address everything. We send everything out to state agencies, that they have the expertise to wetlands, to cultural resources, to water quality, quantity, fish and wildlife, habitats, all those. We work closely with them. We will go onto site and look at the site with them. That's how we process an application. So if the concern is we don't have anything in writing, maybe I can try to, write out, what items I'll look at and present that to you and see if that's something that is, sufficient. In terms of setback, Crook County only require a 20-foot setback from property line. Is that sufficient? It depends, because if it's vacant land next door, maybe that's fine. But what if you have a residence? Maybe the residence is not a part of the project. That may not be appropriate, depending on the topography and a lot of other reasons. To put a hard setback on something is very difficult. But perhaps we can put like a minimum setback, a reasonable setback of, I don't know, like right now in the EOZ, we say 500 feet minimum. Is that something good enough? Maybe not, but that is why we have the public process to identify whether there's sufficient or if we need to increase that setback or to negotiate less if the landowner become a part of the project. So those are things that we can do and to provide some kind of assurance to the public, to the board to say that we do have something in place. It may not be in writing, but we've been doing this for all the wind projects, for the only solar that we have.
So do you see a reason to do a pause, or do you just see that, because if we say we're on a pause, that might just push them into FSET?
I think if
we're not gonna make major changes, I got no interest in saying pause. If we're not going to actually make some setback stuff or get involved in actively diving into this, if we're only gonna write out a little note on what we're thinking we're gonna do, there's no reason to pause to do that. We can do that without a pause.
Well, I would say for me, since I'm the one that raised the issue, I am conflicted in that I don't think in an area where there are higher density of residents, where there is potential conflict, that having, we basically now have no policy as to the size, how much, how it's, that, and I think that is a relevant question. Is that, when I look at the wind farms, I was obviously a big proponent of the wind industry, still am. We could have some more here, great. And, we have them here. But there is no limiting fact. There's nothing in the ordinance that says we couldn't have wind farms across the entire EOZ. There isn't anything that says that. That hasn't happened. It's not likely to happen. It's the same with solar. There is nothing we could have. There's nothing in the ordinance, the EOZ, that prevents us from having solar, farms across the entire EOZ. I think we would all agree that would be bad. We wouldn't want to see that. It would be detrimental to the overall character of the county. I'm trying to figure out how to balance, because I believe, and I've said this before about private property rights. I think that those, if I have a right to be able to seek the highest, best use of my property, and if that's a solar lease, it's a solar lease. That's what I should be able to do. But I think there should be some sideboards or guardrails or something on when, how much solar in a contiguous piece goes in an area where there is, and I think that number is different in Bickleton than it is at Knight Road. That those are two different landscapes, and that, I think part of planning 101 is compatibility in the landscape. That is a overriding consideration of things, is that it doesn't matter any more than I'm allowed to have, some use on my property as far as an agricultural use. That would be great. But you wouldn't want to see the entire county in that. That was probably from, stem to stern. And I don't know how to get at that. That sounds like a policy discussion, and I don't know how we have that discussion. And put that, maybe I'm the only one that thinks that way, and then that's fine. But I think it does make a difference. I know in some places, I was looking at some places in the Midwest where they have limits on the maximum size of any one, contiguous,
Most places do, yeah.
and then there has to be some space in between, and then there's another, obviously there's some consideration given to projects have to be a certain scale to make it work, and that it's not, but I don't know that I want to see, thousands of acres of panel in a contiguous, and there's nothing in our ordinance right now that prevents that I can see.
There's nothing that prevents.
I mean, is there anything in there that says you can't do that? I don't think, any more than I would want to see 1,000 wind turbines stacked one on top of each other in lines. I think they're intermittent. I think they're great. I think they're beautiful, but I wouldn't want to see.
Every time you drive over the hill, you see.
I see them.
There's 1,000 of them.
I know, and I don't know if I would like that. But, and again, that's a public policy discussion. I don't think we've had that discussion.
No, we didn't.
We didn't. How do we do that? Or maybe we don't want to have that. I want to have that discussion. I'm going to use my chair's prerogative. I'm less concerned about FSEC when it comes to Knight Road substation. I think there's a little grace there, I will call it, because that is such an attractive spot, because that substation's already built and there's capacity and they know that. And I'm not talking about anything long-term. I completely agree. I think projects that go to FSEC, that is a loss to the community. Absolutely. And I don't want to do anything that forces that. I don't know how much of, just doing a moratorium, a short-term moratorium for that Knight Road substation area of development is an automatic that it's going to make them go to FSEC. I think FSEC's expensive. It is onerous. It isn't, I don't want to see them do that because it does cut us out. I mean, they will consult with local, but I know we get consulted with on a lot of things that doesn't mean much. So I don't want to do that, but I think there is a sweet spot somewhere in between. I will say I don't have, it's more to get at the policy discussion than, I don't have concerns about the environmental controls at all. I know what our oversight and how we do stuff. And again, I would put our system up against Crook County anytime ours is actually is more onerous and more, or not onerous, more substantial, I would say. Sir, you've been patient.
I play well with tigers. I share my toys. No, I agree, and that's part of what I'm talking about with a setback from the road and whatever, because right now they can take, 990 acres of solar panels into a 1,000-acre piece of land. Where if we have rules in place, that whatever, it's 800 and 1,000 pieces of land, whatever number you arbitrarily, or you put your policy in place, however you do it, is going to make them have a big enough piece of land. The solar is going to be out in the middle of it, not along the edges. It's going to be set back far enough. The fences can be set back far enough that it would make it not completely ugly as sin. For any of these that we're putting in the middle of areas where I don't think they should be anyway. We have to be able to protect our rural character, and if we do nothing, either ordinance or policy wise, we are affecting our rural character. I don't mind doing a short, non-scary moratorium.
I don't know what that looks like.
For the FSEC kind of thing, or we just start fixing what we want to fix and make it well known and do it in a shorter period than government normally operates. But
I want to hear from Mr. McClure.
Yeah, I do too, if he'll do it. I was looking back there. Come on up where we can hear you, son.
he's fine. He's off camera.
I like hiding back here.
He's actually on camera.
Yeah, he's got him in the.
Every time he goes and grabs his.
Yeah, I know. I know I'm causing him heartache and headache and.
I just don't think that when people, even the people that thought we might get solar, never thought that there would be 5,000 acres of it, of which 3,000 of it has solar panels on. I mean, this will be by far when it's all said and done, with the amount of, 600 megawatts available in there, that's huge. This will be the largest, by the time it's piecemeal together, the largest solar anywhere in the Northwest, in my opinion. I don't think people planned on that.
In terms of, limiting the size of projects, I think the limiting factor there is going to be the capacity at the substation they're going to reach. So if we look at Knight Road, for example, and say they've got 500 megawatts they can handle, get onto the grid there, or 1,000, whatever it is, then solar projects are going to be proposed out to a radius to where that doesn't make economic sense anymore. So if you say it's a 50 megawatt maximum project, then you have a 50 megawatt project here and a 50 megawatt project across the street, and then you spread that out. I'm guessing.
That's what I've seen other states do, and it's.
I mean, is that a bad thing necessarily? I mean, I know it's not. I mean, are you, or is it the idea is that you just concentrate the pain in one place?
Yeah.
And
There's pros and cons to both, I would say. Other than having zones where in this zone, we're not going to allow more than 200 megawatts, and in this zone, you can have, that's the only way I can see keeping it from.
Still a big project.
it is.
It's, if you say 5 or 6 acres, 7, 8, I've heard, who would pick your rule of thumb?
Right,
6
it is.
or 7 acres a megawatt, you still got a pretty good size.
But I know they do build, I mean, because we went to Avangrid, that was about a 50 megawatt wasn't the Avogrid.
I think it was 250 side by side at Avangrid. I can't remember what.
So, I mean, they're obviously can scale at that. I mean, I don't know, maybe this is a non-issue as far as from a policy standpoint. I just think when we talked about it, that's not what we were thinking.
I guess the other thing is when we go through SEPA, whether it's EIS or whatever, one of the major discussion points during that is the environment. And in that environment, you have the discussion on wildlife. And blocking off with 7-foot tall fences, 6,000 acres or so of wildlife is likely going to get you an appeal by Fish and Wildlife because it changes how the animals move. There's an entire species of animals, multiple species of animals who are going to lose connectivity.
Right.
And so whenever they design these projects, they're going to have to design them to allow for that. And these solar companies know that you can't bite off too much or you're just going to get slapped down. And so I see the process is likely working out in the end. You know, there might be 6,000 acres total out there. I have no idea what number that have leases on it, but even when you have a lease on it, you could do up to this much. They can do a lot less based on the topography, wetlands, and everything else. It's just they got that under contract so that nobody else can get it. We don't know what it's going to look like. But through that process, once it's proposed, it's going to go, it's conditional use. So it's going to go through the SEPA process, which is going to be public. And then it's going to go through the conditional use process, which goes to the Board of Adjustment, unless it gets appealed. And if it goes to the Board of Adjustment has a lot of leeway in saying, you're proposing this big thing, but we want this setbacks and these things. They have a lot of leeway in that ability, correct?
I guess I would say that and I don't disagree with you that the Board of Adjustments is going to play a huge factor in this when it comes to setbacks and wildlife corridors and things like that. I think I would just say that the majority of the residents out there that don't trust government, don't trust the system, they don't know who these 5 people are that sit on the Board of Adjustments, and they sure don't trust them because they don't know who they are, would like to have some minimums in place. So I don't disagree with you that I think this could look much better afterwards, because I do trust the Board of Adjustments to make those decisions. But I think for livability and peace of mind to our residents, minimums at least, I don't know, I don't even know if it could be done on this little zone, because, I don't want to mandate 500-foot setbacks in the middle of 13 miles south of Bickleton where, nobody's even walked in 500 years.
They are mandated now, unless they're,
No.
you're in the project. No, because that's the overlay zone from a house.
Which is right on the guy's property line.
Right.
So it's still on the property line. So, that's what I'm saying. Minimums, I think, would make people feel comfortable before it all gets worked out in the wash. It's just a matter of whether we wanted to make minimums, what it would take to make minimums. If there was also interest to shift policy on how much or how many or how congregated, you know me, I'm wide open to any of it.
I don't know. I think there's a way to.
Well, can you do guidance, if you drafted a guidance document, we have conversations, the pre-submittal, where you lay out, here's.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Ordinance.
Can you, because again, I think we have the ability to.
So there's expectation.
Expectation as far as what we want. I'm trying to get to how do we do that because now when you read the stuff, it's not concrete. It does not say that. And yes, we can say, oh no, it'll all work out because by the time you take out the wetlands, by the time you do this, by the time you do all that, it isn't going to be a 5,000, which it is going to be, if there's you know, if there's 500 or 600 megawatts at Night Road, there's gonna be 5,000 or 6,000 acres of, you know, likely. Eventually, not next week, not a single project, it's not. And is it all gonna get built in one single I think no, because the topography, land ownerships, wildlife corridors, all that stuff is gonna break that all up. But there's nothing in the ordinance now that absolutely says it can't be. And that's I think we need to provide some guidance that says, here's our goals. We don't want to see, even though those are embedded in SEPA, they are embedded in SEPA.
Right.
That you don't do all these things. Maybe you pull those out and we have it there's a guidance, as you said, a guidance document. So the projects know that this is the expectation of what we want from a project that comes to Klickitat County, that locates in this area. Here's our considerations, and I don't have an issue. I mean, guidance is no different really, Night Road versus Bickleton. We still have, you know, well, maybe it is too different. It's different. It's different.
That's the hard part, is because it's too, you know, I don't think many people out on Lund Hill, like I said, I drove through Lund Hill last Friday. And it's absolute middle of nowhere. You don't want a setback, you want your fence right along the road, I'm fine with it, I don't care. But you come out here where people gotta commute to and from town. We have the city of Goldendale that is already economically impoverished, in my opinion. And you're trying to grow it and get people to want to move here to replace our older generation that's stepping away from the county. We don't have daycare, and you get a commute to and from past 5,000 acres of solar panels. If we had, it's totally different than the middle of Bickleton. If those solar panels are right along 142, that's gonna make everybody's commute just ugly as sin. You have to.
I think that's a relative term.
We have to take those into account, whether that's a guidance document or something, and it's gonna be different whether it's here, downtown Centerville, or middle of nowhere Bickleton, or if you wanna put it right in the middle of Houston. Conditional use permit, and get that sucker installed.
There's not as much sun over there. Oh,
It's in the bottom of a hole. There's not many hours of sunlight.
Well, apparently there's potential windmills right on Finn Ridge Road up there, kind of behind me. DNR sent a whole road out for SEPA, which is Shriners own the 1,000-acre canyon behind me, and DNR is kind of up on the top. That's about the end of where I can go. But I think there's more. DNR would love more potential out there. We eventually have to figure out, as a policy decision, how much are we going to accept of green energy, and where are we going to accept it? Do we want to accept it in our, I hate to call it an urban area, or does it need to stay out in the sagebrush and puckerbrush, where I think it was originally thought to need to be?
Hate to bring up another issue, but when you put these solar panels in the sage, you have to do environmental mitigation for the sage part. That adds to the cost of the value of the solar project. If you put it on tilled up farm ground, no environmental mitigation. So right now what we're in essence doing is pushing the solar panels onto the middling productive farm ground, not high value farm ground, because you can make more money off of that per acre. But there's something to be said that we have to think about our agricultural land base when it comes to solar panels, because of the mitigation cost of doing it on that sucker ground,
stuff that you really would rather,
which you would rather have them on.
But there's a financial incentive to not.
To not.
And there's some problem with the model that makes it that way. Well, another thing, and I think, and this isn't a discussion for today necessarily, but to your point, I think there is a policy discussion to be had on overall, it's in my perspective, and I've been, you know, pounding my shoe on the table about this for the last 4 or 5 years, is what is a reasonable level of depreciating tax base that you want to have in a county. Like these projects are great. They're great for the tax base. They are. I mean, you're going to park $100 million project out there. And when you talk about driving by the ugly thing, that's a matter of perspective. But the one part that isn't ugly is the taxes that project is going to pay that to the whole county.
Well,
No, they do pay it to the whole county in the county general fund and the county road fund. If we look at the wind projects at their height, now I'm just going to illustrate
that, but
this.
I'm saying the one thing that they're not paying is any taxes or any revenue to the city of Goldendale.
That's not in the city of
I
Goldendale.
understand it, but the people have to drive to and from. The people in Goldendale are gonna be more
Well, then they're
put
not
off by
residents of
that by the
Goldendale.
people of White Salmon.
But I would
solar
say-
project is far gonna more affect the people right outside this building than it will
Sure.
be the people of White Salmon.
But the people right outside this building will also receive a tax benefit in that they are citizens of the county and they do pay general property taxes even if they're in the city, and they do get county services even if they're municipal residents. And so they do benefit from that. When you look at the total, at its height, the wind turbines, the wind projects accounted for about 30% of the tax base of the county. That is depreciating though. That doesn't mean we're not getting the revenue, it's who's paying it. They're down, and that is a concern because that's still a positive, and I'm waiting because I've been patted on the head by Department of Revenue a couple times about, it's going to be okay because when they repower, they do heavy maintenance, going to reset those values, and it will, the shift will go back the other way. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that happens, but I think there is a discussion to be had about what's that level that we're okay with, because you could see, when solar is done, you could see that double. I mean, we could have that much of an investment again in solar projects across the county. And so we could end up with 50% of our tax base is depreciating. Our tax system in the state was not built for that at all. That doesn't mean we're not going to get the revenue. The school's going to get the revenue, the library's going to get, it's the who's paying it. So what you're essentially doing when you do that is that you are creating a future liability to the regular taxpayers, because every year when that shifts, that the dollars come off that project and they get redistributed to us regular taxpayers. That's fine, but I think we need to have a discussion about that as far as, and my thought is that we need a legislative change to change that tax structure so that we can have, level, Calpine, I was out at the city today, I asked him about that, it's not depreciating, it's regular, it's a flat, it's right. And it's like, why isn't these, and it's, we need some kind of shift, because that's a terrible idea. All our system is built on that we have our tax base is either level or generally it's appreciating over time. Your house is worth more today than it was 20 years ago. It was worth.
Depends on if you live on Fish Island.
Well, let's keep this positive as far as in general, it is, and our system is built on that it's going to stay, at the very least, it'll stay roughly the same, or it will appreciate over time. Not that it's depreciating 6% every year. And so our model doesn't work. And so
I can't imagine they would do the same depreciation with solar though, because it's a 30-year project. The guy says it loses 0.5% of, brags up how great the cash turnover at the end of the life. There's no way they can depreciate these things over 30 years, I would think, but that's a question for Krista, which I wish
that's
we were,
the assessor.
I wish we were still having that. It's one of my
But it's
questions.
personal property, and that's
Depreciation schedule.
what your appreciation schedule is likely. I mean, my understanding is it will likely be the same as it is for wind, which is 6% per year. It's on a much steeper than, I would rather see an income base, or, if it's operating, it's worth this.
Right.
But that's a discussion for a later date. I know our capacity as of today, I got lots of appetite right now. I'm just saying, at some point, there's a ceiling out there that we need to think about. You know, we're at the floor now, and I'm good. I don't want to give Mr. McClure any more heart attack.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you're talking about the, so I think the project over here, the gas plant is, I believe it's the city's largest
Right.
tax generator. I mean,
So you can imagine that that was depreciating 6% every year. That would be really bad for the city. That means everybody else, including Mr. McClure, would be paying more every year since he's in the city.
Well, I
Yes,
thought we
yeah.
might need to talk to the city of Goldendale and have them incorporate a nice little chunk of county land into the city, and then they'd get the money, and that'd be awesome.
Which county land is this? Oh, you mean the.
They can just incorporate Knight Road into the city.
Anyway, yes, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I have faith in the process. I have faith in our staff, and I have faith in our Board of Adjustment that they're not going to ruin or piss in their own backyard. I do think that it would be best for them and staff if we have those directions that we would like to see, those things that we care most about, and direct Mr. McClure and Mochi to work to come up with those things that will give direction when it comes to the solar projects, that it will give a sense of security to the people that are currently on the phone, that we are not going to leave them high and dry in the end. And when we get that back, we can then decide whether we can turn that into just directives for when they meet with the solar people, or we turn that into policy, or whether we turn that into an ordinance. But the first thing is you both of you have brought up many good questions, good decisions. We've gotten hundreds of emails from people with thoughts and answers and ideas on these questions. And we have plenty of information, I think, to begin designing that kind of directive. And I hate walking away from a meeting without, this is where we're going from here. And that's what I would like to see personally. I will absolutely defer to both of you because this is in District 2, sitting next to District 3. The people in District 1 are probably just going to experience the bone and benefit of this, and the fact that more renewable energy that is depreciating, that sets a new floor, which helps us at the county keep our budget okay. So we don't have to raise taxes. But in the end, everybody feels it. So that
My
would be,
answer, you know me, I'll take what I can get.
What do you want to do? You're the one that always has to make it work. My concern, I mean, I want some guidance. I want, whether it's, we develop an ordinance, whatever. What's the danger of if a project came in the door next week for Knight Road? We know it goes through the conditional use permit process at this point. What is our ability to provide concrete guidance to that as of today? What sort of action do we need to take to be able to ensure that? Because I've heard of, we've seen this in other places where, you're in the process of doing something, then you try to kind of do it, and then you end up, you're trying to kind of implement the new guidance, and they're like, no, we're back where there was no rules on this stuff, and we don't have to do it. And if you try to make us do it, we'll see you in court because it's cheaper than FSEC.
Moratorium, I think, is the answer you're asking.
That's the only tool I have.
That's the only way.
What is the monthly, is there a minimum, or is it just 6 months for a moratorium?
No,
Make it
No,
whatever you
that
want.
is the maximum of 6 months.
right.
And we can renew it And
So you could make it monthly and extend it all the way out to 6 months.
You have to have a hearing within 60 days. That's the
But the
max.
moratorium can end sooner than 6 months.
Right.
In order to implement a moratorium, doesn't there have to be an immediate emergency?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think you can do it. The only experience I have ever had with a moratorium, no, it was never my experience. I don't know, other than marijuana, which I'm not sure what the emergency.
I was gonna say, I don't know how you have an emergency there, but.
The only other one that I was aware of before I was a commissioner was when the board, that then Board of Commissioners, was when they changed the subdivision ordinance where it went from 20 acres to 80 for minimum, that was exempt. And there was no advance anything because that's the whole point of the moratorium, and they just did it. And then they changed it.
So your thinking is that you're going, I'm not putting words in your mouth, I'm just trying to understand what you're saying, is that you can go along with a short-term moratorium while they come up with their directive-y thing to make sure that the solar doesn't get in before they come up with their directive. Right. Well, whatever you want to do there, let me know and I'll make the motion.
Why?
Can you do the same thing? Do you have the?
That's what I'm
order
asking,
These
is there-
companies that if they come in tomorrow, you can be like, look, guys, this is what you want to do, but this ain't gonna get through our process through either SEPA or through the Board of Adjustment. You're gonna have to, there's gonna be setbacks. There's gonna be this if you want to get through this.
Well, without a moratorium, the date will always be vested under the current code and regulations. I can still process. The outcome likely may be the same. However, the developers can always challenge the county as to what authority you have to impose those
These
conditions.
conditions.
So if you make a moratorium, you have 60 days before you have to have a hearing. But if you made a 60-day moratorium and canceled it at 59 days, because you've done what you've needed to do, you no longer need the hearing, is that correct?
No, we still need to have a public hearing.
Even if you
Yes,
cancel
even
it?
you have the moratorium for just one day. You still-
One day you had to
you
have
still
a
need to
hearing.
have a public hearing.
That transparency, public process. Moratorium, that's a blunt instrument.
Big.
It's a blunt
It's a
instrument.
nuclear option.
It is.
And resources wise, I have to be honest, is I am.
What, all this other stuff we talked about today, you were gonna have
And
done by
there's
next
things that we
week?
didn't talk about, I still need to work on.
Oh, like what?
Pending appeal. that, you know,
Public records request.
Records request.
Yeah,
As much as I love my job, I can't work 24/7. And even I do that, I can't get.
You can't get it all done.
what would you like to do on this, Mr. Chairman?
Oh.
Then we can move on to the next thing.
Are you expecting to see an application in the next 60 days?
I don't know. I mean, I be honest, I talk with developer, they call and ask questions. I can answer questions, but I generally don't take anyone's word at face value.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
So I cannot tell you if they will or will not. Because I'm sure they have their supervisors to tell them things that they might have to change, because my contact is not the highest.
Okay, here's the question I have. Can we do a moratorium, but it's only to the Knight Road substation?
Well, that's what my motion was, west of 97, just so we didn't scare anybody else off. You can make it west of 97 and north
Because
of.
again, my personal feeling is that that's a different circumstance than,
Absolutely.
because it's both in this, it is, but also in the attractive of that substation. That's not gonna go away. I think the county has more leverage to have projects built in the way that we most want to have them done there, separate than someplace else to the east, where there's it's less desirable as far as the substation capacity and transmission. I mean, this is different. I'm less concerned about it over there. So that's back to can we do that or not, in your opinion?
My initial opinion from planning perspective is I don't see this a prohibition that we cannot select a location that have most concern that currently does not have an ordinance such as an EOZ to address solar development. Because, for Bickleton projects, we have the minimum setback requirements. Not only the residents, but the developers have some guarantee knowing how far away they have to design their project.
So I don't think anybody's complaining about what's going on over there.
At
That's all
night
fine.
substation, we do not have that option.
Right.
Even though our process is built to address those concerns and issues. But when the developers submit a site plan to me, they may already know how they want to cite their proposal. They may rely on certain setback that they thought that's the case, but I don't have that numbers, in my code to tell them that. So to answer your questions about moratorium specific to the night substation, from planning perspective, I think that's possible, but I don't know from the legal standpoint.
Okay, here's a thought. The unintended consequences or anything. The whole reason I made the motion to go through the CUP process for Knight Road was to give us more ability to affect and impact the overall outcome from the county's position in terms of negotiation, bargaining, and everything, and to ensure that it was a public process. What we did by making sure it was a public process and having public hearings and everything was to remove the 500-foot setback that is in the EOZ. Rather than a moratorium, would it make more sense to implement a 500-foot setback for solar projects as the basis, as a vote? Everything will be 500 feet unless there is a negotiation with the neighboring landowners, and let that stand until we get something further down that path. So that,
Yes.
So that would be a change to the zoning regulations that you're
I
imposing.
was gonna say, so we can't do that any more than we can
So
short-term
we have to go
rental.
through that public process, even to have that add on,
Right.
because the EOZ is a zoning order, is a section of the zoning ordinance. So if you want.
How much flexibility does the Board of Adjustment have in so walk me through, I'm an EOZ, I'm a solar project, and I come in, I get you got to get a conditional use permit. Here's your thing, because you're going to hook up to the Knight Road substation, and per resolution, blah, 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 you got to do that. There's a public process as far as it's conditioned. So obviously the public gets to put input on your project proposal. That goes to the Board of Adjustment, which are the 5, God help them, volunteers that are not being paid.
We only have 3 currently.
And we only have 3 current ones. So welcome to the,
You'll have more on Tuesday.
yeah, soon to be none.
If you keep talking, we might not have more on Tuesday.
Okay, so then planning staff provides a staff recommendation. You go through the whole SEPA thing, all the stuff, provides a recommendation. I'm assuming the recommendation could have guidance, or would incorporate guidance that it had gotten from the legislative authority of the county as to what we want to see within the guidelines of what's possible
Yes,
in that.
and generally, before we even take that before the Board of Adjustment, during the public process, if we have any concerns or comment raised about the layout of the project, because it will be a part of the application packet,
I'm feeling better.
we will send those to the developers and ask them to address them. So that happens.
But what does that send it to them and ask them to address them? What does that mean?
If anybody tell me that like 100 feet setback from property line is not sufficient, and they give me a valid reason why that is not sufficient, then that is a concern that raised during this process. Then I will send it back to the proponents or to the developer and ask them to find out if this is truly a concern and how can we address that. That happens during the solar application for Run Hill. Mr. Hansen has concern about, glare and whatnot. And there was a concerns and we need to address those. And that's why, I asked the developers to talk to Mr. Hansen. Something happened and Mr. Hansen still have concerns, but the glare is no longer an issue. If that continue to be.
How do we know that the glare is no longer in here, or the, whatever the concerns were no
Because
longer?
Mr. Hansen sent another letter to
Okay.
the department to say those two concerns has been addressed and, the others still remain, but those two issues are no longer an issue.
So let's say in that scenario that, hypothetically, they get comments from folks that live out in the area of the project and they say, we think there should be at least a 2,000, foot setback from property lines and and a list of, I don't know, a whole, bunch of different things. The company, the applicant, I don't want to say the company, the applicant is, and you say, oh, you need to go address this. Obviously, it's likely that there's not going to be they're not going to accept that as suitable. So if there is no resolution, it goes to the Board of Adjustment. Obviously, the Board of Adjustment would get that and they could impose whatever they felt. They're the ones that are going to decide what that should be. They can set the conditions.
Judicial body, so they're like a judge.
Right.
So based on the evidence or information before them, they can make a decision, in terms of the conditions attached to the permit. If anyone disagree with those conditions, they can appeal the decision to Superior Court within 21 days and move.
And though, as being the judges, those members of the Board of Adjustment cannot have ex parte contact with the project applicant or any other person outside of the public process at the public hearing.
Yes, and if they do, they have to disclose those contacts, and then the board will decide. The 5 members can decide if they can continue to participate.
Well, this brings me right back to where I was trying to ask a minute ago.
Okay.
Wow, don't forget it right off the bat there. So my point is, when Board of Adjustments is doing this, they can't have those communications. That should also mean that they don't have communications from us on this matter because we have a vested interest. So I think it's imperative that we have something in writing that is our directives or whatever you were kind of talking about with her earlier. So we have, this is what we would like to see.
Right.
And we can say it without getting in trouble saying it.
But I think we can do that outside of a moratorium. Because we're assuming the whole scenario we laid out was that the company comes in tomorrow and submits an application.
Well, then you have ex parte communications, but the minute that happens.
No, I can talk to staff. We can talk, because we're actually talking generally, as long as the conditions are not specific to that project that we're talking.
So if we had a directive and we gave it to staff and staff showed that directive to the Board of Adjustments.
As a guidance, I think you could do that, couldn't you?
And the guidance, if you have a guidance to me, then when I process the application, even before I write the staff report to present to the Board of Adjustment, those will become an elements that they have to meet those criteria.
Right.
Before I can, schedule.
One way or the other, I want to make sure minimum we get guidance.
Right. Jake.
They come in, they submit a conditional use permit. That conditional use permit, you require an EIS. They fill out an EIS. There are comments on the EIS. Those comments say they're proposing 20-foot setbacks. The comments are, we want 500 or we want 1,000 or we want 2,000. Those comments go through, somebody puts an appeal in. They appeal the EIS and the SEPA. That then comes to us to act as a quasi-judicial body on that SEPA EIS.
If there's more than one appeal. One appeal would go elsewhere, wouldn't it?
No, the SEPA always comes to us.
No. So that SEPA appeal would come to us and we would have the ability to set conditions off of that SEPA appeal, or do we only do an up or a down?
you can always remand it back to the planning department.
But for the conditions on where the setback should be,
Well,
do we have that ability?
If people appeal the EIS, it's generally it's about the adequacy of the EIS, it's whether we address all the elements. It's not just only focus on the mitigations. And the EIS process is actually, you will have to go through the draft EIS process by scoping,
Mhm.
so we know what the concerns are. And then you go through a draft EIS, we receive comments, those comments will be addressed. And those comments will actually be published or, summarized before we can issue the final EIS.
Right.
And so that
And,
should,
and the company has to respond to the comments adequately before we ever issue a final EIS.
yes,
And if you don't feel that they're responding to the comments adequately to manage that, you're not going to issue the FEIS, correct?
right, because that's the whole
Point
idea
of it,
of
right.
the
Yeah.
process.
Like I said, if there's an EIS that goes through, the system will make sure to take care of the neighbors and everything I see.
And I think if Dave and I are going to work on some guidance, it's also not only good for the residents, it's also good for the developer that they have. some
Right,
kind of
absolutely.
assurance, because it's a two-way, that's
Right,
exactly the
absolutely.
public process. That I don't take sides, I'm neutral in processing an application. So everyone need to give me sufficient information to process whatever in front of me as, the planning person.
So based on hearing the whole conversation, what is your what should we do? No, I'm serious, to implement I think you have a pretty good understanding.
You're gonna put motion.
No, I'm not.
That was almost as bad as one of you guys asking the proponent to speak during
I know.
Right.
during the one thing. It was.
I
Thunder
still
Canvas
think it
Day.
would be absolutely fabulous to have the solar companies that are thinking about doing it sit at that table and give us some back and forth. I think that would be huge for enlightenment, but that's the story. Sorry, go back. I was trying to get her off the hook, but you won't let her off the
It's
hook.
fine. If your recommendation, there is no recommendation, that's
The
fine.
recommendation is you were.
You tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Dave,
Yeah,
do you have
that was her recommendation. You were elected to make the decision.
How long will it take to outline some guidance? I mean, a lot of it could be based on what.
Yeah.
And I would imagine they would outline some guidance that would come before us. We can maybe tweak something, throw it back, and that would be
Right.
the official guidance.
Right.
How's 2 weeks in?
No.
I'm starting low. I'll feel it get up from
We
there.
negotiating
I do the best I can, I just,
would have been better if we'd have started.
Well,
off
the only reason I care is that I think there is a danger of, if we don't have some kind of guidance that has kind of our stuff that's in place prior to an application being submitted, I think there is a chance
Then we get screwed.
that we can't use that guidance on that permit if they don't want us to. They meaning the company,
right, so.
without a moratorium,
So.
which I
then-
don't want to say.
Right, but that's the only tool that I have
Okay,
that we can do. And the moratorium, like you said, is a pause.
it's a pause.
It does
While
not.
we make up whatever.
Whatever, right,
It
it's
just
a
provides
timeout.
time for staff to work on the.
Right,
guidance
that's what they're for.
documents, And then we can lift that, with the guidance
Okay,
I
documents.
think as long as we don't make some Klickitat County 2-year moratorium, we're not gonna scare anybody to the F6.
No, I
If
don't.
we're putting a 30-day or a 60-day or whatever, and they understand the reason why we're doing it, we're not.
Oh, they're
scaring
listening
anybody
right
away.
now.
Well, I know, and that's why I'm trying to clarify this. Is if we're only trying to.
Yeah, do you
what we're trying to
understand what we're
do,
trying to
And
do?
it's only a whatever term you're willing to let me make a motion for.
Would that be only limited to the night substation then?
That's for me, because I don't want to,
I say the motion when you give me a date, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days.
So it'll be basically, maybe night, or it's just basically projects that are subject to CUP because they're not in the UZ.
Oh,
What did you just say?
Projects that are, then this is unique. It's not,
because
it doesn't have the buffers, if you will, in it because it's going CUP.
so if you do it
The others are
specific to
covered,
projects
others are
that are
captured.
going to,
If there are any
that are
injuries.
through the CUP process, yeah, I like
That was the way I was working it,
That's-
not an EOZ relation.
Yes.
Finish, please.
It wasn't gonna be an EOZ in relationship to, it was gonna be a CUP project in connection with Night Road.
If you're talking about making a motion, I would maybe suggest you do it during a public meeting. This is a workshop.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
good catch. Thank you.
The workshop is still,
I mean, it's a
We've-
public,
we've
we've
made-
made motions, but
we've made motions.
I know,
right?
but just given the, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah.
It's your discretion.
she doesn't want
It's your discretion, because now she's gonna get a permit Monday. Or she's gonna get a permit application on
No, I
Monday, they're gonna
don't think
file
so.
it.
I don't
I
think
think we
so.
can wait till Tuesday.
She can hide till.
I just be sick.
So
We can close
so
the-
how about-
I'm gonna be sick
How
that.
about this for
Your staff
direction?
gets Monday off.
Dave and Mochi, you guys come back with two different motions that we could use on Tuesday that you guys feel will protect the citizens of Klickitat County in the best way possible.
Are you talking like, come back with making a motion?
The motion that we're gonna make, because whatever you were about to bubble, I was gonna have to vote no on it.
All right,
Would have died for.
I
lack of a
will
second.
allow, as long as you allow me the privilege of reading it.
Of course, a draft. They're gonna bring back a couple of drafts.
That you allow me the privilege
Yes.
to read, all right.
And maybe Commissioner Anderson will make the
Allow me
motion.
the privilege to bumble through.
Will that work?
Sure, absolutely.
She's got more she's planning on talking to us today, or are we winding down?
I hope we're winding down because it's,
I just had a quickie question for you, and seeing the people that are on there, I don't know, I understand we don't usually do it at a workshop, but you know, I'm throwing an option out there for 10 minutes of public. Yeah.
I'm not.
got it. All right,
No,
I said that.
and I don't, and I
God's
respect
only
that.
responsible.
No, you were fine. I just don't want to get, I think we've really held the line on workshops are the
That's true.
opportunity
I will give you that.
for the board
Yep,
to
yep.
be able to
Fair.
talk amongst itself without concern or, you know, that we're gonna
Bumbling.
have. No, the public can walk bubbling. Well, I'm bubbling now. So I'm gonna say that, no. Anything else? Anything easy? Simple?
Thank you
No.
both. I know this isn't easy.
This isn't easy for anybody.
No,
This
it's
is-
not
this
easy
is
for
tough.
any of us. This is.
Boy,
walking a hard place every
short-term rental sure was easy compared to this.
But it was the most difficult of the three.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, well, if there's nothing more, I'm not particularly concerned or interested in pending issues. We just talked all day about pending issues. So if there isn't anything that's got anybody's hair on fire, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Thank you all for listening in.
Yes, thank you all for
Thanks, staff,
listening.
for
Yeah, for
tolerating
tolerating.
all of us, or especially me.